Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Wait, Are These Guys Friends? I am Mike, and as always, I am here with Randy. And boy, oh boy, do we have a big one where we're going to hit a little what we watched and then just a massive topic you saw in the title off the top. But Randy, how was your week?
Doing well, keeping busy. Actually did a lot I'm sure you did too, a lot of research for this one.
Yeah,
There was a lot to dive into, more than I think the usual than our actor comparisons.
this is going to be a long one. So, since it's going to be a long one, let's dial right in right away with a short, well, I say short, two topic, we'll say what we watched. Gemstones finale, Randy, what'd you think?
I liked it. It was a nice different approach where you saw the growth of specifically the Gemstone children as they came through. I mean, really kind of highlighted in that final prayer. We see that actually all three of them have kind of moved forward. They're certainly not perfect people by any stretch of the imagination. um, Spoiled, vulgar, yes, all of the above, but they have found ways to better themselves, and it's a really nice kind of turning arc. And I'll be honest, when we were in the whole scene with Corey, Sean William Scott's character, essentially sort of American Psycho esque, hunting down the three gemstone children inside the house with red wine playing at 400 decibels. Um, I for a moment thought, is this like almost kind of like Pineapple Express end where almost everybody's gonna die? And that's how it's gonna be. Like, this is gonna be that someone is either gonna have to, it's just gonna be Eli surviving or something like that. For a moment they had me that the kids were gonna die. I'm glad they didn't do that, but for a moment I thought that's what was gonna happen.
Same. And as always, time codes below. If you
Yeah.
want to skip to something else, please go
Whoops,
to town
spoiler.
because we're going to get that. Yeah. So we didn't dive into much because I say that because I'm about to get a little more direct. When he shot Jesse, I 100% thought they did it. Like, they're killing Jesse. Like, his ultimate redemption is to, I don't know, sacrifice himself. And that's how they're going to get away with him. But you're right. I like how they handled it with the prayer. I don't know how I feel about Eli winding up with Miss Laurie. I love everything with Judy and BJ and Dr. Watson.
Yep.
Baby Billy and his family got a nice little resolution and if nothing else, before the little epilogue, I say epilogue, but that little tag bit with Laurie and Eli, I really do feel like the perfect ending would have been Eli walking off with his whole family happy at the wedding.
Yeah.
They wanted to give him a little something more, and that's fair. Like, I am not one to behoove. It's like, how dare you be happy with someone in love, you monster? But narratively, I guess I just felt so fulfilled then, and I wasn't in love with Miss Laurie the entire season, even when it turned out she wasn't a bad person. So I was like, all right, fine, whatever.
They tried to show that happiness can kind of come in different forms. I think that was the other part of it. And so it's, be it not conventional, be it with all its warts, with all the things that come with it. It's sometimes, love is like survival, right? Ooh, well, look how deep I am. But it's
Proud of you.
that's part of it, that because they went all together, they came out stronger, right? And so maybe their bond with Miss Laurie and Eli is stronger because of what they had to endure with Cobb and Corey. I mean, yeah, all of the above.
So it did make me think of last week, though, because I asked straight up, do you think there's something deeper going on with Corey? Why would they cast Sean William Scott for this role for what has essentially been a very minor supporting part? I do feel slightly justified and like, there it is. There's like, yep, okay. They wouldn't have, maybe he would have played better. I wouldn't have been thinking that if they cast a nobody, you know?
And it's interesting because I think Sean William Scott doesn't always get his due, but if you've seen some of his other movies like Goon, or there's some other ones where he can play sort of understated a lot better. I think everyone just automatically thinks Stifler or Road Trip or
The
things
problem
like
is he
that.
was so good in
Right.
so early, he got locked in. He is so fun in that you're right. There's a whole problem with.
But he's good at it. Like, this was a good simmering performance, right? Like where I mean, almost conflicted too at the same time, but hiding it at Michael Rooker was obviously evil. Like it's not there is no uh uh
When does Michael Rooker play a good character? Like a nice guy?
if you want to say Yondu, I mean,
Oh, yeah. What am I
yeah.
thinking? Of course. Uh, Although terrible becoming good, so he still had
Right.
to have a redemptive arc.
Still pretty bad, but
Yeah,
you know.
exactly. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking that. He's still a dirtbag at the end of it. So, any other final thoughts? I still feel like my final thought. Let me ask you, but then say mine. That's how this works because I'm selfish. I still feel like this is the type of show where I want them to take the British model, where cool it, enjoy your hiatus. I don't need a full season. Come back for a Christmas special. Come back for a one-off TV movie in 3 years. Give me something because I bet there's going to be a story to tell a couple of years down the road, even if it's just an episode or like a movie.
Also, I mean, again, just at the beginning of it, where he's with the I'm blanking on it, Cape and Flask, no, Cape and what's the
I
name
don't remember their fucking
the society, right?
Yeah.
And
they end that storyline so quick. The one that I was like, I think that story's over, and you're like, no, I don't think it is. It basically was.
To the point when Eli, who is Mr. Pontificator, Mr. Thought-Provoking, starts to go into the long scripture of, when I was a child, I put away childish things. And he just goes, when I was a child, fuck y'all. I think it was just like a perfect capper to that whole thing. Really, really good. So, but to realize, I mean, we saw that was more of Jesse's growth. Just like, I don't need this shit. Like, and Eli, putting faith in his son where he may not have always had it there. Yeah. And you saw it there and then it just developed all the way through. And I think that was a nice thing about most of this entire season is that we saw the growth, whereas in previous seasons, we barely did. It was almost by accident we'd see growth.
I will say that the only missed opportunity for me, simply because I like the actor and I liked the character so much, is really after the first few episodes of season 2, Gideon never mattered again. He was always shoehorned in. He was always just put in there because he was part of the show. I would have liked a bigger subplot, a larger role for everything happened off screen with him being mentored by Eli. That all happened off screen, offside of like one scene. Him forming his ministry with what the hell's the other brother's name that you could
Pontius,
you called that, by the way, that they were going to form something by the end.
Mm-hmm.
But it also happened in a montage. I would have liked to have seen and enjoyed and developed all of that. And that's not to say it didn't hamper the finale. To me, it's just a missed opportunity. I enjoyed that character, and I think I would have enjoyed that journey watching all of that, personally. But with that, you ready to take a hard left into Marvel territory?
Let's do.
So last week we previewed Thunderbolts, just kind of talking about what we think we'd get out of it. And I talked a bit about the history of the Sentry and how much of that will we get on screen. And, going into it, I guess first I'll just ask, did you enjoy the movie?
I did. It gave me, it was a different place to explore that I think we hadn't yet. It was characters we knew, but introducing a few concepts that we weren't sure about. Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character, forgive me, Valentina.
Yeah, definitely.
And we haven't really maneuvered with her that much, right? So it was nice to have her sort of at the forefront of the tweener kind of, right? The bad guy, but still working within the government. And I think that's a good role.
She's a full bad guy. You call her a tweener. She is a full bad guy. I don't know where you're.
But
I don't know where
optics,
you're
I mean, so like,
yeah,
no,
because she's lying. There's no tweener there. She's lying to look like a good person. She is a bad person. Now I know where you stand. You just trust the government and all things. You're like, they said it was good. That's Randy's take.
There we go. Yes. Hooray. Look at my new Avengers. But
this is our new pro-tariff podcast. Anyway, moving on. Sorry. What are you saying? Yeah, sorry. Not the right topic. Okay.
But to have that established kind of the force behind the evil or the not good, something that the others need to come together to fight towards. And I think that's the other part of it, is that these are not traditional good guys that have to come together. That's why Guardians work too. Different than Guardians. I didn't think it was as funny as Guardians, but still same kind of idea. A bunch of ragtag people that are used to being things used outside the rules, outside the law, but they come together and they're working together because they have one kind of common thing they're pushing towards, and they realize they kind of need each other and I think that was the most interesting thing that Thunderbolts dove into, is that the biggest part of this is their own mental capacities, right? Like that's the biggest thing that the Sentry had to fight, or Bob had to overcome, and together they all had to do that together. Elena finds out that it's like her own loneliness that is the biggest thing that she needs to battle, as opposed to any task or any I don't know, adversary.
Right. So my question for you, I have two things I want to get into.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want, and I can go either direction. Do you want first my take on the actual film as a film, or do you want my take about the film as how it relates to the MCU?
So let's go film first, and then we can go into the MCU.
I really enjoyed the film as a film.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked the characters because of, maybe it's because it's been a hot minute. They felt like they had more depth than a Marvel movie's had in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all coming from this. This is really fascinating because it's mostly B movie and TV show characters, right? These are not, and they don't. I think a lot of people, including myself, had said this felt like it was going to be Marvel Suicide Squad, and I still kind of buy into that, even though they've tried to downplay that comparison. But I liked it. I thought it was well paced. I thought the last act was a really, really well done last act, because there was action, but it really came down to the emotional stakes and talking more than. You could say that for like Falcon and the Winter Soldier or even Brave New World, but that talking felt so heavy-handed. You know, like I think of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where Sam does his first scene as Cap, and he just looks at them and he's like, "Be better." I was like, that feels a little on the nose, guys. That's, you know, this is a real exploration of trauma and pain, and, you know, again, is it the deepest exploration of that in the world? No, but for a Marvel movie, I was like, yeah, I'm in on this. I really connect to this. This is great.
I think I also liked, you know, and obviously it was CGI enhanced, the final scene when they're fighting through all the rooms and everything, but it wasn't our traditional big honking set piece, giant fight, blow up buildings one, right? I mean, well, I mean rooms, but you know, it wasn't battlefieldy. It was nice to have something that was a little bit different from a visual standpoint that they were fighting.
That's what I like about it, is it actually does it in reverse. Is I don't feel like it builds to the big fight. It starts with the big fight and actually gets smaller to the point where it's all them in an attic. And I'm like, this is, maybe it's just because of the inversion of the formula. It makes it feel fresh, but it's also, I think, the connection you have to the characters, as we both said.
Also, performance is all pretty good from the people we knew. That's Bill Pullman's son, right?
Yes, I didn't realize that, but the name Lewis Pullman sure does give it away.
Once I saw it, I'm like, yeah, boy, it sure does look like him. So, but I thought, boy, he was really good at
He was great.
Kind of conflicted, like just acting without everything in his face. You could just see it. It was really, really good. Good casting choice there. Which
is crazy because he's actually the second choice. Stephen Young from Walking Dead was the original choice. And they nailed it with this so hard. It's hard to imagine what that would have been. Like, this was perfect.
Yeah, that would have been good, but I'm glad they went with this route. I think this was excellent.
It was great. It was very well done. So, do you want to talk a little overall MCU, arcing, Marvel, et cetera here? So, we've already hit some plot stuff. I don't feel like we hit too bad of spoilers on the movie.
Yep.
I will say, here's your big spoiler warning for this. Right now, Timecodes below. That said, it's already been ruined. They couldn't wait a week. I don't know if you've seen the marketing. At the end of the movie, Thunderbolts asterisk turns out to reveal that it really meant the New Avengers, because Allegra, Julie Louis-Dreyfus, tricks them when they're just about to arrest her into being introduced as the New Avengers. And, you know, they kind of hold it over her and blah, blah, blah. But, like, that first off, the fact they couldn't wait more than a weekend. All those, you see all those posters in LA being replaced with New Avengers and billboards
Yeah.
saying New Avengers. I guess they want to make sure people know before next year. They need to hammer that home because in the mid-credit sequence, you can see it's a pretty big plot point that they're the new Avengers and Sam Wilson's going to have the original Avengers or traditional. Although right now I think it's just him and not Falcon from the end of
Right.
Brave New World. So get your team together, bro. Who are you going to have? That leads into, you saw the Fantastic Four in there.
Yep.
I'm going to set all that aside. While I enjoyed this movie, both this and Captain America needed to come out 2 years ago. This movie needed to come out within 2 years of all those fucking TV shows that they're referencing. With all those TV shows with those characters. I liked this movie, but the impact it would have had and the way that it would have, I think it would have, people felt like this last phase was really treading water, right? Like there wasn't anything happening. Like, what are we doing? If you had put this in the middle of that phase, halfway through this process, I think people would have had a different opinion of the phase. Like, oh, I can see what they're building to. Something's coming. I'm feeling this coming together because you've brought all these things we've been watching together. Instead, think about Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and your first appearance, I think, of Allegra de Fontaine, came out in 2021. And she's had like 2 appearances since then. You needed this out years ago to really have the impact it should have had. But that's my big take on this. I liked the movie. You took too fucking long to get this shit together.
I wonder, though, if this is going to start to become rolling downhill, right? Like, because Fantastic Four coming, and like just as they're all coming quicker, so maybe it took a while to get there, but now we're gonna get inundated with it, right? It's gonna be a very comprehensive hit now, where we'll get as much as we need. Now, if they'd spaced it out better, I agree, but
you would have helped your phasing and your reaction. I'm looking at the real world aspect of the negative reaction to the last couple of years of the MCU. You could have staved some of that off, I think. The last little bit I'll say of that is I do like that they're leading into Fantastic Four. They're leading into Doomsday, which will lead into Secret Wars. You know why I should probably not worry about any of this? Because I'm telling you right now, Secret Wars is going to blow it all up, and in 2028, we're starting fresh. None of this is going to matter in 3 years. We're going to love it. It's going to be a nostalgic phase of the MCU. You can watch top to bottom from when they started it to when they rebooted it. I'm calling it right now. 2028 is a clean slate. They may have a couple actors transition to help ease that harsh start over. But as far as the continuity goes, there's going to be a new Iron Man. There's going to be a new Captain America. Oh. I'm fucking putting my fucking flag in the sand on this right now.
I will say I was heartened to leave Thunderbolts, with a little bit of anticipation and excitement for things that are coming, which has not been there in probably the last 4 to 5 Marvel movies.
Literally what I'm saying. Yeah. That would have happened if you'd put this 2 years ago. You would have thought about this.
I'm still glad to have it, that being said. So it's just, it would have been nicer to have it earlier. Agreed.
Exactly.
Space out the anticipation a little bit more so it doesn't feel like garden hose, which...
But with that, I believe that's all we really have. We got to get into our main topic. We got to get this shit moving. Crack it along. We are doing an actor battle. We are going to do, as we always do, but for anyone who doesn't know, we are going to look at 2 actors' IMDb's for a time period. For this, we are looking at Steve Martin versus John Candy. Now, at one point, we were going to look at a full 15 years. Then we realized what a terrible idea that is. I wouldn't say when we realized it, but there is a point when we thought, oh, this is fucking stupid. This is way too long. This is way too much. Long. Way much we want to get into. So right now, we're only going to do 1980 to 1989. That is when they both started making feature films. I say both. Steve Martin obviously had his debut in The Jerk in 1979, which was a massive hit, directed by Carl Reiner. He had been doing stand-up before that. He had been hosting SNL and becoming a megastar. John Candy was working his way up in the comedy world as a member of the SCTV troupe in Canada, but clearly very well respected already, as you see with the role he lands in his very first film. Before we start this, any thoughts on the pre-1980 careers of either Steve Martin or John Candy. John Candy Randy. Sorry.
It's John Candy is pretty well known in his native Canada at this point, and probably had some, I don't want to call it indie buzz maybe down here in the States. Steve Martin is a massive star.
Oh, yeah.
So leading into this, it's interesting just because Candy definitely known, Steve Martin enormous. I mean, just like albums, everything. Like you said, the Saturday Night Live stuff. I mean, he had been. I mean, he started writing for the Smothers Brothers in the late '60s, right? So like he has a. I don't want to say he has a head start sort of in this in terms of stardom, but actually, I will say that.
I have 2 Steve Martin hot takes.
Mm-hmm.
One about his overall career and one about his early career. I could do the early one now, or I could give it 5 years of us analyzing. When would you like it?
Let's do the early. Dude, give me your early hot take.
The Jerk is an all-time classic that everybody loves.
Yep.
It is so funny. It is so good. It is 5 years until Steve Martin makes another good movie. He does not make. That comes out in 1979, and we do not have another good movie from him until 1984. And I will get into what I think about.
Okay.
I watched 2 of these for the first time and rewatched one of them, but we'll get into all that.
All right.
So this is I've gave my thought, so I now turn it to you to offer. Would you like to start with John Candy or Steve Martin?
Well, it's pretty easy in 1980, so. But
I was gonna. It's all about the discussion, though. You know, we could say.
Let's start with John Candy. How about that?
Fantastic. And listen, John Candy makes his, I believe, if not feature film debut, perhaps American film debut, or at least his debut into the real mainstream with the fucking Blues Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're watching the YouTube or Spotify video version of this show, I have a Blues Brothers poster over my shoulder. It is in my top 5 favorite movies of all time. I have seen this movie more than most things ever in my life. We're not going to hit the plots of these big ones just to save time. But Randy, Blues Brothers fan?
Love it.
Yeah.
Still, as ridiculous. It's funny to call it a car crash movie because there's a giant car crash in it, but they it is it's so unique, but it's so great. Like, it's such a rollicking, fun, good time and hilarious and ridiculous, but just everything about it works really well, even if as they plot, it's pretty nothing.
Right, but it's more than, so I said we were going to be done with what we watched, but I actually would like to use this as a comparison. This is, of course, the first Saturday Night Live movie. It's based off characters from SNL with SNL actors after the show had become huge. I actually just saw 2 days ago at time of recording, they re-released Monty Python and the Holy Grail for its 50th anniversary back into theaters. And listen, that movie is still fucking hilarious. I love it. But where this movie and that movie have similarities and differences, they are all just a sequence of kind of sketches and little bits barely held together by a narrative to get to the end, right? But the Blues Brothers has such a strong bit of connective tissue that it, with the songs and the minor character performances, which is where I include John Candy, who is brilliant as, I don't know, the lead sheriff who starts leading the cops to chase after the Blues Brothers. That little bit of him helping with the chase while they try to reunite the band, this is loose plotting, but everyone has such charisma and is doing such an amazing job that it feels so much more cohesive than, as much as I love it, a Monty Python.
Right. I think you're having too much fun to ever critique anything that's going on. Where Monty Python a little bit slower, and also, even though it veers dramatically from the source material, there is legend based in what they're doing. So I think so they adhere a little bit to something within that storyline where Blues Brothers is just like, nope, eventually we're just going to get to the theater, but the way we get there has no rhyme or reason other than we're going to run into famous people that are going to sing songs and do these like super catchy musical numbers.
and to focus on John Candy one last time.
Yep.
Unless you have more to say, I will say Orange Whip, Orange Whip,
Orange Whip.
Orange Whip. Like
Three of them.
it's weird that that's the scene that I think for him cemented people to be like, I like that guy.
Yeah.
He's actually the bad guy, but I like that guy. This movie, my goodness, this is why we got this in Wayne's World, or I think even though they're 10 years apart-ish, are why we got so many bad SNL movies at one point, because this had a $27.5 million budget, a $115.2 million gross, and that's in 1980. To crack $100 million in 1980, this movie had legs. And listen, you can't sit here and say, well, that's because of John Candy, but he was a vital part of it, and obviously, especially, we talk about when we do these sometimes where you get a default win, because as you had hinted, Steve Martin did not release a movie in 1980 following up The Jerk. He took a year off. His SNL time was winding down for several years. His stand-up was winding down. You know, he took a real kind of gap year. But John Candy doesn't get a default point that we're upset with. This is a banger.
This is earned. It's a small part, but memorable part. So.
Yes.
You win with that, and that might be a recurring thing as we keep going with John Candy. So, but
and the thing is, we move on to 1981. And
are you gonna? We're just gonna skip over the other movie
for 1980. I didn't see another movie for 1980.
It was either called Deadly Companion or Double Negative, depending on what you.
Son of a bitch! I really tried to make sure I didn't do this time.
I'll go real quick through it. So basically, directed by George Bloomfield, I think is his name. He was the SCTV director. So, but it is a blackmail thriller murder mystery. So sure, whatever.
It's serious, not a comedy.
Correct. And the way I'm going to gloss over it is that because this guy was the SCTV director, he put a bunch of SCTV people in it for like 5 minutes. John Candy is in this movie for like 5 minutes. So it would not have added anything to this. But I would say it doesn't take anything away. Blues Brothers is the primary thing we need to know. But this was just a movie that I thought was fascinating as I did a little bit more research about it. The other thing that happened with this movie is as it got video releases later, VHS, like the covers or posters, it puts John Candy on the screen with Anthony Perkins, who's the main character. And it sells it as if he's like one of the top billing, and he's in it for 5 minutes.
I love it when they do that. They do that for everything. Think about the 60s original Little Shop of Horrors, where Jack Nicholson has a 5-minute scene, and he is like, they Photoshop him holding the plant on the cover at this point.
Yeah.
It's just like, come on. Really? I looked up, by the way, if you go to the Deadly Companion wiki, that is the picture on the Wikipedia page. And it's like, I can't imagine that picture of John Candy is from this movie. That looks like they took it from the 90s, but then Photoshopped it in with that era Anthony Perkins.
It's very possible. Like I said, apparently that poster or that image you're looking at is from later video releases, not as the initial one happened. I tried to dig a little bit more into it. Again, it was released as 2 different names, which is really weird. Double Negative or Deadly Companion.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
And
because I said Deadly Companion based on the wiki.
And it was depending on where it was released. I think it's a Canadian movie, so I think it was released as Double Negative in Canada. So it's just anyway. But fascinating that that was one of his movies, but not really relevant to anything. I don't think it detracts from his 1980. It doesn't take down Blues Brothers because that keeps it above, and he wins 1980.
I took down so many notes in an attempt to not skip one this time because I always wind up skipping some, and literally out of the fucking gate. I'm so disappointed in myself. I'm so disappointed in myself right now, Randy.
That's all right. Again, it didn't affect what the scoring is. I think John Candy wins 1980, and deservedly so.
We move over to 1981 with Steve Martin because we usually pivot.
Yep.
And this is Pennies from Heaven. And let me tell you, I'd always been intrigued by this movie, and I finally watched it yesterday. This movie is bad. It is miscast, and it is just all over the place. I said before we recorded that, I was like, how much do you want to hit plots? I was like, well, I'm going to hit the plots of the more obscure ones. And I feel like I should probably do it for this one. Because this movie, made for $22 million in 1981, had a $9.1 million gross. This was a big old bomb. And man, it's Steve Martin takes the year off and he comes back with a dramatic musical, not a comedy musical, a
Yeah.
dramatic musical.
Dramatic concept musical.
Oh my God. So it's the depression and he's falls in love with someone else and he nearly and he's tanking his marriage and it's reuniting him with Bernadette Peters from The Jerk. And all of the musical songs are not them singing, they're lip syncing to songs from the 20s and 30s. And I will tell you, Christopher Walken is a villain and he has a supporting role and he is the best part of this movie. And my first thought was, they miscast this. He should have been the lead. This would have worked as a dramatic musical with Christopher Walken. I think it would have played differently. It would have felt different. The tonal shifts wouldn't have been there if Christopher Walken was the lead. Randy, I have more but thoughts on Pennies from Heaven. Have you seen Pennies from Heaven?
A long time ago, but I think the biggest thing that happened, you said he's reunited with Bernadette Peters. I think people were confused. This is Steve Martin's second movie ever.
With Bernadette Peters again.
And
yeah.
again, and I think people are going to think that they're going to see some sort of wacky take on, something. Is this going to be another The Jerk? And then when it was completely different, completely dramatic, there is very little comedy in it. I think that threw people off, and that's why the reaction. It's not a good movie anyway, but like that being such a big difference from something that came out from The Jerk, I think that's what threw people off a whole bunch about this movie.
Watched this yesterday. I knew very little about it going in other than it was a musical. I assumed it was a comedy musical until so I rented it for $4. I paid $4 for this. That will be a theme as I paid $4 for several of these. I eventually got a $28 charge on my card and I thought, what have I done with my life? So that said, when I booted up on the old Apple TV, and I notice you get the little description in the info box, where you can turn on the captions, you see the starring. And I noticed it didn't even say musical, it said drama. Yeah. And I thought, what is this? What do I not realize going into this? And if there's comedy, it's because Steve Martin is overacting in all the musical scenes. He will be trying to be dramatic, but still not super dramatic because he's not there yet in his career. He will get there, but not right now. And all of a sudden, he'll turn and it's goofy, fun, singing, dancing, lip syncing. And I'm just like, this is bad. Siskel and Ebert hated it. They said pretty much what I just said. They're like the total whiplash, the miscasting. The best scene in the movie, and I actually recommend seeking it out. I think I even texted you about this. Go find Christopher Walken doing Let's Misbehave because it gives you that real weapon of choice, Fatboy Slim vibe. He is so fun in this. And all I can think is I want to just watch more of him. He's captivating doing what he's doing. Last two little bits of trivia for this for me, unless you have more. Fred Astaire, 2 points. Legendary singer-dancer Fred Astaire. There's a point where they use footage of him. I forget from which movie I had
Follow
it.
the Fleet,
Yep. There it is. Mm-hmm. They reused footage of him, and he said he tried to fight it. He didn't want them to do it. He lost because he didn't have the rights to the movie. He thought the movie was boring. He was appalled by it. He thought Steve Martin was bad. However, Christopher Walken claims that Fred Astaire personally gave him compliments on his bar top dance scene, which took him 2 months of rehearsal and 2 days of shooting. So,
and maybe he thought he honored it more. Yeah, I don't know.
Probably. Again, he was better. So, Steve Martin said to Rolling Stone, I'm disappointed that it didn't open as a blockbuster. I don't know what's to blame other than it's me and not a comedy. I must say that people who get the movie in general have been wise and intelligent. The people who don't get it are ignorant scum. He is, of course, joking at Steve Martin in 1981. Yeah. But there you go. Any final thoughts before we pivot over to John Candy?
Not Steve Martin related. Worth noting. Bernadette Peters won a Golden Globe for this movie, which is bonkers to think about.
I don't think it's that bonkers. The Golden Globes have always been the most corrupt of the awards ceremonies, haven't they? They have always famously been the ones that people would be like, you give us less money, you get a Golden Globe. We got to get a little much for this. I say that perhaps hyperbolically, but I also say that I'm going to stick by it. I am not a Hollywood insider, but I have eyes. So, it's just what it is. pivoting over John Candy, we'll hit the one that we kind of touched on in several. We did it, I think, in our Bill Murray Chevy Chase battle because he also voices someone in Heavy Metal, which if you want to really hear our thoughts on our confusion of heavy metal or thoughts on heavy metal, go find the Bill Murray Chevy Chase episode in the old audio archives.
Yeah.
But any final thoughts on heavy metal? It's just a sequence of, cartoons, vignettes. They got a lot of impressive voice cast. And I always forget to look up the box office. Did this do well or did it bomb? I never remember.
It did. It made double its budget. So 20 mil on a $9 million budget. So yeah.
So there you go.
It did well. It was kind of a phenomenon there for what it,
Yep.
Noted for a bunch of different animation houses working together to put all these pieces together. I think we can count it in John Candy's thing because I looked to see how much he was in. He's in 3 different vignettes of it, like in his voice. So
okay, great.
So he plays 3 different characters. So like, you know what? And that's enough for him to be part of this. You know what I mean? Then
and looking it up, it is a lot of SCTV alum, produced by Ivan Reitman, and it's Canadian, which I didn't remember from looking up before. That is a big theme in a lot of these early films for John Candy. Get that SCTV Canadian goodwill going. We've also already talked about Stripes. We got really into Stripes in the Bill Murray episode, but we also mentioned there how good the supporting cast was, which once again includes John Candy. Great movie, loved Stripes, and it did real well also. This one, think about the 1981 that Steve Martin had, which was $22 million budget, $9 million gross. Stripes had a $9 million budget and an $85 million gross. So again, these are supporting parts, and I recognize that. But when you're in supporting parts that are constantly grossing close to or over $100 million, you're getting noticed, you're building your career, you're having a good year.
Also, and like whether it's the mud wrestling scene or the fact if you ask anybody that's seen Stripes and you ask them about Ox, they're automatically like lighting up and excited about it. So that performance gets to go there. The one note I had from this movie, and I don't think we covered it when we talked about Bill Murray, and this is another like fun point for John Candy, is that nobody in the that played members of the platoon or whatever knew the words to Do Wah Diddy except for John Candy and Conrad Dunn, who played Psycho. So they taught everybody the words to Do Wah Diddy, and then here we are. So
that is really nice.
Like, that's super fun.
I have a less fun one. That in the shot or in the scene where all their heads are shaved to go into the army, John Candy got very depressed after the scene was shot, and that's why you see him picking up his hair and looking sad, because that is genuine. Since Bill Murray and Harold Ramis were bigger names at that point, they cut their hair shorter, but they did not have to shave their entire heads.
Oh, wow.
So poor, and that was according to Ivan Reitman in the DVD commentary.
Jeez.
So
poor Ox.
Those poor bastards.
Mm-hmm.
But so obviously, unless you really suddenly want to take a hard left, this is a John Candy win. 2 in a row, coming in strong.
Yep.
It's a John Candy win, 80 and 81. But don't you worry. And Steve Martin getting his default point, because John Candy did not put out a movie in 1982, which is a shame because Steve Martin's 1982 movie sucks. So it's a real bummer. What do you remember about Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid?
I thought it was an interesting premise. I think I would have liked almost like Leslie Nielsen playing this. Like, I thought that would be really interesting and fun. Like someone who's even just more deadpan about it. Steve Martin kind of worked.
That's a really good shout. I hadn't thought of that. And this is 2 years after Airplane, and this is right around the time they're making the Police Squad television show. He would have been perfect in this and would have elevated it. Steve Martin's hammier acting doesn't work again in this.
Right, because it's not, I think you almost have to take it too serious, like very much Leslie Nielsen's style, where you're almost oblivious to what's going on, but which sort of works because in theory you would be, because you're acting against footage from 40 years ago. The other thing, I remember watching this, my stepdad was a big Steve Martin fan, so I remember we rented a lot of Steve Martin movies throughout and we rented this one weekend, and one of us, I don't know if it was my sister or or my stepdad or me, one of us made the comment that this is one hell of a cheat for 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
That's
Is
a
that
good one.
if you ever want to say, all right, James Cagney was in Don't Men Wear Plaid technically with Steve Martin, who was in, and you can go from there. So it's just a very easy way to do it. So but that doesn't have any bearings on how good a movie this is, but it was a fun thing. I put that in my notes because I remembered that.
I will say I obviously liked this more than Pennies from Heaven. There are funny moments in this movie. To say it is
Yes.
devoid of laughter is not true.
It was a better concept, I thought. Interesting concept, but just
it's
not
very
executed great.
creatively shot too, because this is what 12 years before Forrest Gump, which would I say try to do similar things, but you get my meaning of there's a lot of over the shoulder shots they try to pioneer with like green screen or even front screen projection, I think, of Steve Martin standing in front of some of the scenes to try to blend him in. And some of it honestly looks pretty good. They get really creative. They pick their angles. Apparently, I think Carl Reiner and the screenwriter, because this is also him reuniting with director Carl Reiner for the first time since The Jerk. And this movie did make money. $9 million budget, $18 million gross.
Yep.
Is it blowing the doors down? No, but it's enough to say, okay, putting these two together will make us a little bit of cash. It's well acted. It plods on a little because they have to do a lot of padding, I feel like, sometimes to get to the bits they set up with the footage. For the ending, I just thought, man, because famously, Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks, best friends, ate dinner every night after their wives passed until Carl Reiner passed, and it still makes me sad thinking about Mel Brooks alone right now. It breaks my heart. But man, what I just thought was, at the end, when it turns out Carl Reiner was secretly a Nazi the whole time, I just thought, man, they love going to that well, don't they? Like, I know that's the whole bit, but man, they go to that well because they love to make fun of him and they know they got it. They got that bit on lock, those two. We were just talking about Martin's performance and how you thought Leslie Nielsen might have been better, and I thought that's a great shout. I remembered a quote that I remembered scrolling. Martin chose not to watch any classic noir films leading up to this because he didn't want to act like Humphrey Bogart or be influenced. And I just think maybe you should have.
I appreciate the attempt, but yeah, like you said, it may have helped.
I think that people obviously also liked this more.
Yeah.
Critics, I mean, liked this more than Pennies from Heaven. But if you're going to compare the years, oh wait, no, I was about to compare this to 1981. Yeah, this is his gimme. This is gimme win. Yeah,
but he earns it. It's not, you know.
He does, but I'm not enamored with it enough.
My bar for this, you didn't earn it, is always Memoirs of an Invisible Man that we did from the Chevy Chase one.
Okay, you're right.
This is not that, in my opinion. It's above that, which again, very low bar. But
you're absolutely right. The fact that we had to give that motherfucker a point for Memoirs of an Invisible Man really does chap my ass when you say it. You're absolutely right.
It made money, you know. Like, is it his best movie? Of course not. But it's.
I'm sitting here trying to shit in his cereal for no reason. You're 100% right. Steve Martin, who will never hear this or meet us, enjoy your point for 1982, sir.
83, let's do it.
We move on to 1983, where there are two movies for John Candy. One that is an all-timer classic, and one that I will admit I never saw. And as I was doing this, certain movies I couldn't take the time to see. And we'll start with that one. Going Berserk is one of them. I haven't seen Going Berserk, and I have to admit that. I did a little bit of research on it, but I don't have a lot of good insight on it. It is another American-Canadian film from the SCTV people. Joe Flaherty, Eugene Levy, John Candy. A lot going on there. Kurtwood Smith's in it, apparently, in a smaller role. Dixie Carter in a small role. But what do you got?
I also have not seen this movie, but did research on it. David Steinberg was the co-writer and director of it, was a Canadian comedian who mostly known for going on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, the second most of anybody. He had made 130 appearances on The Tonight Show, just behind Bob Hope.
I was about to ask who's number one, but that makes sense. What have been the last time Bob Hope was on The Tonight Show as a guest? I know that's a deviation. I'll look that up later, but now I'm genuinely curious about that. Yeah. Anyway.
That's just he was known. I think he had kind of like a Robert Klein kind of take on things, like that was that sort of comedy that was there, you know, universal, but was very suited to being a Johnny Guest and stuff like that. It wasn't reviewed very well, but Candy's performance was apparently pretty funny. The only other note that I had is just like you said, Kurtwood Smith's in it, but also another future famous TV parent, Allie Mills, who would play the mom in the Wonder Years, is also one of the primary characters on this
I mean,
movie.
if we're just naming famous people in the movie who weren't famous yet, Pat Hingle went on to be Commissioner Gordon in the Batman movies, and Ernie Hudson is motherfucking Winston Zeddemore in Ghostbusters.
My connection was that it is future famous TV parents in sitcoms.
Oh,
but
my
yes,
bad.
go ahead.
Okay,
So.
my bad.
No,
I'm really here to
had,
fight today. My bad. I thought we were just naming the other famous people in the movie.
Sure.
But no, the New York Times did say John Candy is easily the funniest thing in Going Berserk, an affably stupid comedy that's saddled with too much plot that hasn't nearly enough energy to go with it.
Yep.
So, womp, womp, womp. By the way, because I cannot help myself, Bob Hope's last appearance on The Tonight Show was in 1991.
All right.
And all I immediately found after Googling that is I looked up the date, and I found it. And the next article down, which I'm not going to read, was from People magazine that said Bob Hope was Johnny Carson's worst Tonight Show guest. So make something to read later.
Hot take.
Yeah, right. Way to go, People magazine. But the other one, which again we have covered, but we'll try to focus maybe more on John Candy, is National Lampoon's Vacation, the OG from 1983. Stone cold classic. Sorry, folks. Park's closed. Moose out front should have told you.
Yep. I think this is a repeat of Blues Brothers, in my opinion. Like, it is small part, minimal screen time, completely memorable performance. One of the most quoted lines from the movie. That's pretty good.
This, to me, actually does something that I think is going to be a big part of John Candy for, gosh, if I look at 85, 86, maybe the next 3 years. So if we include this year, where it is not credited as a cameo, it is not listed as uncredited, but it is a very small part that is absolutely fantastic. He does this several times because if you were to look at the base nature of this role, this approaches cameo level in my mind. It's that small. But it has just enough meat on the bone where I'll give it that it's not. Am I barking up the wrong tree here?
So if it was only him at the front of and then, getting shoved maybe into a closet after he let him into the park. But I think the fact he rides the roller coaster with there's enough that it tailors through. I think it carries through, and I think that helps it.
What else can you say? It's a very funny movie. He's fantastic in it.
Yep.
It's before Chevy Chase became truly insufferable on screen or to the public. He was obviously apparently already that behind the scenes.
Yes.
So unless you want to have a deeper discussion, I'd give the point to him now. We haven't talked about Steve Martin, but think about it. No, I'm kidding.
I don't really want to, but okay,
yeah,
go
no,
ahead.
I'm kidding. 1983's The Man with Two Brains. And this is yet again pairing him with Carl Reiner.
Yeah.
And this is with Kathleen Turner, who, was she properly famous or getting famous at this point?
83. No, I thought like Romancing the Stone was like her big.
That was
the next
84,
year,
right? Yeah, that was 84.
So on the up, coming.
On the up.
Yeah.
I have high hopes in the first 10 or 15 minutes
Mm-hmm.
because it does feel more jerk-like in its approach to humor. Random little gags, one-off lines. You feel like Carl Reiner and Steve Martin are maybe trying to get that old magic back. But then it just kind of becomes a slog and peters off. I want to like this movie more than I did. Do you feel the same?
It just, that's interesting that you bring up that they were attempting to follow sort of a narrative, non-narrative structure of The Jerk, right? Because the more I think about the plot of this movie, there are elements there where things are just happening, and that he kind of runs into, the elevator killer in Vienna or whatever, and like all these things. So maybe they were going for something similar to that, where, guy runs into things that move the plot through. But boy, my note I wrote for this is like, even for early to mid 80s, like screwball comedy standards fueled by cocained up writers, this is too much. I can't. I can't be bothered with all the nonsense that's going on. Like it doesn't it I don't know. The funny parts or lack thereof don't hold my attention long enough for the nonsense.
Before I touch on the box office, I forgot to mention it for National Lampoon's Vacation. Budget of 15 million,
Yeah,
box office gross of 61 million. Again, not a John Candy advertised movie in any way, but still a
sure.
very healthy gross, very fun
Yep.
movie that started the franchise. Moving back to The Man with Two Brains, I can't find a budget. I've been trying really hard to find a budget,
Yeah.
but by all accounts, it only grossed $10 million, which is more than Pennies from Heaven, less than Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. I'm not under the impression this was a big hit. Am I crazy? What am I
I would be
getting here?
stunned. Everything kind of seemed to be in that, what, 7 to 10, 7 to 12 range around this time. So
Yeah.
I bet it made its money or just slightly ahead. So
The wild thing is Roger Ebert, who, if you look at his reviews of Steve Martin's career, never really liked Steve Martin. A lot of middle of the road 2 out of 4 star reviews, including this one. But Rotten Tomatoes, over 25 reviews from the era, 80% from critics.
I disagree.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm with you, not that.
Yeah.
So it's very confusing. Clearly, John Candy gets another point, right?
Yep.
Quite
3-1.
quite the run he's going on right now,
Mhm.
which I did not anticipate before doing my research. As we approach 1984, I just thought, well, Steve Martin's one of the biggest stars in the world. He's cracking, he's cracking, he's cracking. And this is what I had said off the top. He made The Jerk, and then he didn't make another good movie for 5 years. Like a truly good movie. But we pivot to Steve Martin in 1984, and there
Mhm.
are 2 movies. The good one I keep harping on, we will talk about second, because I do
Okay.
have to address The Lonely Guy, which is now the second movie out of these 2 guys I've never seen and actually hadn't even heard of until I started my research for this.
Yeah.
Had you seen this? Were you aware of The Lonely Guy with Steve Martin from
I was
1984?
aware of it. I don't think I'd ever seen it, or maybe it was, gosh, I feel like this is one of those, it was on a cable channel or something, and I tuned in for about 20 minutes and then said, nothing's really happening. So I tuned back out. So I have seen a portion of it at some point. But I couldn't tell you much about it other than I researched it after that.
Yeah, once again, Roger Ebert hated it, 1.5 out of 4 stars. Weirdly, Gene Siskel loved it, 3 out of
He
4.
did, yeah.
Sometimes those guys get nuts. Rotten Tomatoes, 50%. Once again, I cannot find a budget, which can happen with box office bombs from the early 80s because people just weren't tracking these things and you just moved on, I think. So it's hard to
Yeah.
find. I will tell you that I would imagine it's a bomb, proper bomb, because it apparently only had a box office gross of $5.7 million.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
can't. Now, listen, it is a romantic comedy of just 2 people. There's not big concepts like there were in Man with Two Brains or even Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. I could see this being a cheaply made movie, but I can't see it being under $5 million cheap.
Plus, I mean, it's in New York. I mean, I'm sure, yeah, to shoot it in New York, yeah.
With
Like,
Steve Martin and Charles Grodin, Steve
yeah.
Lawrence, Merv Griffin. Like there's names on this that are gonna push
Second
this
straight
over.
Steve Martin movie with Merv Griffin in it, by the way.
Oh yeah, I forgot because in
Very random.
Man with Two Brains.
Spoiler alert, he's the
yeah.
killer, so.
Yes, to the point where they put a random disclaimer at the end, like Merv Griffin is still on the loose and has not been found, which did get a chuckle out of me. Again,
Yes.
even the worst of these have moments where I laugh. The problem is, I think a lot of these earlier Steve Martin movies in this middle period have such pacing issues. They just keep going. They can't cut a scene or a joke off, or maybe they should, or trim something. There's a lot of fat to them that just doesn't need to be there.
I wrote a question, and I'll pose it to you, Mike. Was this just a touch ahead of its time, and the movie going public wasn't quite ready for this kind of romantic comedy? I mean, we're not to When Harry Met Sally yet. We're not to Sleepless in Seattle. Like, are we just? I mean, I guess you could argue Annie Hall is kind of like that already, but it's different. That's a little different. I mean, are we not ready for that sort of attempting to be charming romantic comedy?
I love where you're going, and I really want to go all in on it, but I need to see the movie to make that call.
Okay, fair.
Like, what if I see it and it's just like
And that's fair.
Yeah,
I guess I wrote that based just on my research of the plot and the description. So I haven't having not seen the whole thing either, maybe that doesn't hold any water.
But I
Curious.
do buy into that because Neil Simon is a co-writer on it, and he really has that kind of voice
Mm-hmm.
that maybe for what he was doing for movies at this point,
Like he set
it
it up for
does.
Nora Ephron to take the handoff and run with it. So, but
This is one I had wanted to try to make the time to see, but you just only have so many minutes
yep.
in the day. Maybe I'll
So many four
revisit
dollar
this one.
rentals.
So many $4 rentals, exactly. But I just I'm intrigued by it. But I love what you're thinking, and actually, your thought makes me now want to go seek this out and watch it to see if maybe we can get
Mm,
into something there. But the other movie he made in 1984, which finally I think fulfills the promise of Steve Martin actually being a movie star again, is
yep.
All of Me with Lily Tomlin. This is a very funny movie, and it reunites him with Carl Reiner again. And thank God the two of them finally strike some gold here. It's fun, it's goofy, but it's not throw it at the wall goofy. Does that make sense? Like there's a little
Yep.
more structure to it, a little more heart to it. There's jokes, but they're not just random lines. This feels like a real movie, and it is received as such.
Yeah.
It's enjoyable. 85% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yep.
I want to look up the Siskel and Ebert reviews because I can't find them. I thought I had them. Give me your thoughts on All of Me.
I mean, we dropped the ball on our body swap comedies, but
I didn't consider this a body swap
yeah,
because
because it
there's not a
was
swap. Somebody wrote on
right.
like the Wikipedia, this was a body swap comedy. No, a body swap involves him going into her and her going
Right.
into him. And All of Me,
They're together, right?
that
One
she
side, the
only
other.
goes into Steve Martin and they're competing for control of the body and the brain. And
Yep.
so, and that's where half the comedy is because Lily Tomlin is very famous comedian at this point. She'd hosted SNL several times. She'd been on Laugh-In, well received, and obviously even to this day, she is just beloved, and everything she
Yeah.
does usually turns to gold. You
Mm-hmm.
think of her on The West Wing. She had Grace and Frankie on Netflix well into her, later era. Lily Tomlin is well received.
Yep.
And she lifts this movie and lifts up Steve Martin probably. Roger Ebert fucking loved this movie. Three and a
Okay.
half stars out of 4. This is the first time I think he's liked Steve Martin.
It lets the actors do what works for them, right? This does not try to. The premise suits the two of them very well, I think, and their comedic stylings, and there is not much. It seems a lot more effortless than other things that we've seen Steve Martin in.
When
That's
you
how I would.
Absolutely agreed. When you think of Steve Martin in the early 80s, and I don't think you think of this later in his life, I don't know if I would have called him a physical comedian, but his
Mm-hmm.
early stuff had a lot of big motions and hand swings and stuff. I feel like the parts where they're fighting over the body and they're doing stuff like that has a lot more of that old Steve Martin pizzazz of physical and moving and goofy. And I'm like,
Yep.
this works. Think of The Jerk, the dancing. This
Yeah.
has
Right.
an energy that all the other stuff. Maybe he didn't want to be typecast, but it really felt like he was fighting against what worked for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And finally he just got there again.
Yeah.
And that's 1984 for Steve Martin. Box office, again, I can't find the damn budget, but I know this one was a hit.
Yeah.
$36 million gross. Not blowing the doors down, but I also don't think probably a hugely budgeted movie
Probably
based on the way it was.
you have to assume at least triple its budget, right? So
Yeah, exactly. Or wait, no, yes, I see what you're saying.
yeah.
I read that backwards. And by
The
read, I
box
mean heard
office
that
would have been
backwards.
triple. Yes,
Yes.
10 to 12. If we're thinking that to be kind of the main budget range for that time frame.
I ain't got your fancy book learning, Randy. It took me a second.
The only other note I had from this, Steve Martin met Victoria Tennant on this movie. They started dating and were married for 8 years.
Oh, that's a good run for him. How many marriages has he had? I didn't really look at his personal life. Is he married now? How happy is Steve Martin?
Probably very.
Yeah,
very wealthy, right. Very happy.
Yeah, he's doing okay.
He is married now. I don't know
he
how
is.
many.
He got remarried in 2007 to a woman named Anne Stringfield.
Okay.
What does Anne Stringfield do? Anne Stringfield is a writer. And she also plays Cindy in Only Murders in the Building. She is married to Steve Martin. Now I'm very curious because I'm being weird about things.
Oh boy.
Okay, so she's 53 and he's going to be 80 in August. So
Right.
he's a rich white man in Hollywood. What can I say? He's not pulling a Bill Belichick, but he's making things work for him.
No, yes, not doing the 78-24 or whatever that is. So, but
John Candy's 1984. I didn't miss one. He only did one movie in 1984, correct?
just Splash. Yep.
Before we get to that, there is a note that I feel like I have to make. Remember, famously, the other movie he could have been in 1984 is Ghostbusters. He said he couldn't get his head around the part of Louis Tully, and I believe they said he wanted to do it with like a Swedish accent, and they were
German.
like, German, there it is. And they were like, John, we love you, but we got to go in another direction. He did wind up being in the music video yelling Ghostbusters. So,
yes.
But other than that, Splash.
Which I think worked out for everybody because Rick Moranis was great in this, and 100%. John Candy, I think, is great in this. But please continue.
Oh, yes. Your first this being Ghostbusters, your second this being Splash.
Correct.
Yes, absolutely. But Splash is a lot of fun, and I had not watched it in a really long time because I feel like it's a movie that fell out of fashion or maybe favor or just has kind of been maybe lost to time isn't the right notion, but it was the 10th highest grossing film of 1984. $11 million budget, $69.8 million gross. Skyrocketed, really, I think, Tom Hanks to proper fame, Daryl Hannah, and obviously John Candy and Eugene Levy are in it. And just this movie did big things, and it's fun as a proper romantic fantasy comedy about a man who falls in love with a mermaid who comes to land. The most thing I remember about it was the Disney Plus controversy when they put this on there and they like added hair that hid her ass.
Yeah.
That wasn't there in the original thing. But what do you think of Splash? I'm going off on a tangent about random things. What do you think of Splash?
Yes. No. Same. Fun. I mean, I watched this a lot probably when I was younger, or this was one of those we had tapes of, so just like to watch. Just fun, charming movie. I like that it is a sort of silly concept that no one ever takes silly. Like it is just played for, there's a mermaid there. I love her, and then they don't get wacky beyond that, right? I mean, that's wacky, but it's very, it somehow feels very real, everything else. The performances are toned down enough that Tom Hanks can't believe that this is happening to him, but he can't deny that it's happening to him, right? And I think John Candy goes along with that as well. I like this movie. I'm a big fan.
I think the reason I was thinking that he wanted to do Swedish for Ghostbusters is because this is where he does the Swedish accent,
right?
To lie about being scientist to try to rescue the Madison and smuggle her out of the laboratory when they're trying to rescue her. That's why I think he was Swedish when he was doing that. I do need to look up a trivia fact I think I saw recently about Splash. Madison as a name only became popular after the movie Splash. It rose from almost non-existence, and then suddenly in 1985, people started using the name Madison to the point where it became the second popular name given to girls by 2001. And that's all because of the movie Splash, and clearly because of John Candy. No? Is that, I can attribute that to him? How did the name Freddy do? Because he plays Freddy, Tom Hanks' brother, woman, which I also love about this because I feel like with this and Uncle Buck and several, there's this weird through line of John Candy being like a womanizer and like or like a real smut peddling type of guy, which I think is so funny because he's such a kind, natural guy in real life. Maybe they're doing that because it made them laugh.
I think so. And he had already sort of started that skeezy character in SCTV, right? So it wasn't that far of a
he the head of the network, and he always made the decisions to try to, and he had like the little thin pencil mustache and he was making terrible that was great for SCTV. Good stuff. But we're looking at 1984, and this to me is first real battle. You're absolutely right. Because, so if we look at, what did I say the box office gross for all of me was? I got to bring it back up.
36.
36. Okay. So it did make less money, but I think Steve Martin gave a better performance in All of Me and does a better job in All of Me, and he's the star.
Yeah.
But John Candy is very funny in what it was a box office hit, a big hit, and a featured co-star.
Right.
I am at a loss to pick. I will tell you, not because of John Candy, frankly. I think Splash is a funnier movie, but All of Me is probably a better movie. So, like, better made movie.
Yeah, this is I go through ahead of time on all these, and I do my initial thought, just like, all right, I mark this one, mark this one, mark this one, and then when we discuss, so I go back and forth with it. This was the only one where I didn't immediately mark, like, which one I know. It's tough because I have to put aside personal bias a little bit because I like Splash a lot more than I like All of Me.
We have to look at it too. I know we include our personal bias always because that's what this is. But if we're really looking at the battle for the year, how do you take a lower grossing movie where you're the lead versus a higher grossing movie where you're a co-star? How do we logically analyze the two of those things to say, well, this person had the better year?
How do we, because Splash was nominated for like Best Original Screenplay, and it's got Ron Howard directing it, right? So
yeah, and it's not his directorial debut, but it is his directorial launching pad. He had done one movie before. This is the movie that was like, oh, this kid, the fucking Opie can direct. This is amazing.
So if we think of that, All of Me doesn't necessarily, who directed All of Me? Was that Carl Reiner also?
Carl Reiner, yeah. That's why I said it was the reuniting that finally worked.
Right. So I'm not going to say that, Splash has this great, directorial advantage, right? Because of what's going on. I'm trying to think of, like, is there a way that I'm making the argument that Splash has more going for it than All of Me, and therefore I think Steve Martin gets more credit for lifting All of Me, but I don't know if I agree with that.
This is actually my argument that I'm having, that I'm looking at moving forward. When you look at the development cycles of movies and things being written, does Steve Martin's performance, which wouldn't start happening until 87, but then it explodes, does Steve Martin's performance in All of Me open the doors to roles like Roxanne, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Parenthood? Does that show he's got a little bit more range, therefore it gives him a better year? And now I could be pulling that out of my ass because that does take a couple of years to develop, but you got to think about what maybe people look at.
Yeah, where we really only see that from John Candy, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and right, like, so
yeah,
because Splash is more of a romantic comedy. Now his character is a certain
but not
way,
for
but there
him.
is
Yeah,
there's right, but there are a couple of dramatic points, not dramatic, but
But you gotta, the way I look it up too is, okay, so
it's I can't believe I'm talking myself into All of Me. I never would have thought that I would.
I'm talking myself into All of Me. I'm gonna go with Steve Martin, but you can talk me out of it. This is your shot.
I think the more we talk on a strictly, keeping all things consistent.
If we're looking at the career
I think I'm
and
with
the people.
Yeah, I think I'm with you.
It sets up much for the future. It's a better made movie. It's still funny. It saves his career, I think, in a way. Yep. People weren't saying that his career was out, but when you look at that this is going to sound silly maybe, but can you tie the escalation, the return of Steve Martin to prominence to the return of that 85, 86 season the next year too, where SNL comes back and then he starts working with Lorne Michaels again. When I say comes back, like Lorne returns. Steve Martin not being on SNL also, as a regular host, also corresponds with the 4 to 5 years where his movies suck. So like everything is down for him. 84 is a big year for him career-wise, I think, that matters for him moving forward with cultural cachet. John Candy's still building his career, so I'm definitely going Steve Martin.
I think I'm on board. So,
all right.
Steve Martin it is. So we're at, what, 3-2?
Yes. Staying with John Candy, moving to 1985, there are some movies here that I really enjoy.
Why don't we start with, because I'm going to have different takes than you, I think, on some of these. We'll start with Brewster's Millions, where I believe it's going to be the same. So
okay. I adore this movie. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I've always been fascinated by the lore of Brewster's Millions as a property because there was essentially a Brewster's Millions adaptation made every 20 years or even less until it stopped in 1985. They decided after this one they would never do it again. It's wild because it's a novel from 1902. Is this one obscure enough where I got to say the plot, or is this a big enough hit where I don't have to? I don't know with this one.
I mean, guy has to spend a lot of money to
get more money.
Yeah,
but you can't tell anybody.
And you can't make money off of it, and you have to spend it all. You have to end with zero. So, and then if you do that, you get this giant amount of money.
And John Candy is his best friend, who is one of the people who thinks Richard Pryor gets the inheritance, who he has to spend it. And John Candy is his best friend who thinks he's going absolutely fucking insane and is worried about him because you're blowing your entire inheritance, who he can't be told what's coming down the line. Yep. But it's just wild to me that, like, the first adaptation of Brewster's Millions was a play in 1906, and the first film was in 1914, directed by Cecil B. DeMille.
Yeah.
So it got to the point in 1985, they're like, Richard Pryor, John Candy, that's the way to go. And it's the best fucking one. Damn it. Which actually, oh gosh, I'm fascinated. Who distributed this movie before we continue talking about John Candy in the actual film? I need to look up because this would blow my mind. Damn. It was distributed by Universal Pictures in 1985. Okay. The first film version was distributed by Paramount in 1914. For some kind of conceptual symmetry, I really wanted them both to have been distributed by Paramount. Like, I really wanted that in my head. It's silly, but I wanted that. But John Candy is the best way I can say to this movie is adorable, because like, is this the first one where he's playing a normal guy who's just a good guy and is fun to be around? He has a little gambling, and he's, obviously he's with Brewster with the minor league team and stuff like that. But he's not a weirdo. He's not a complete degenerate. He's not doing a voice. He's playing like it's him. Not him, but you know what I mean. He's just acting as a guy. And this sets up a lot of great stuff for the future for him, I feel like. And he is on the poster, which I think is a big development, because a lot of these other movies, he is a co-star who at best has like a little head in the corner, right? He is a featured part of this movie poster. This poster has Richard Pryor popping out of the center of millions of dollars, and above him is John Candy smiling in a suit holding more money. This is advertised with John Candy in a big role. Is Richard Pryor's name above the credits? You bet. But John Candy's in this movie, and they want you to know John Candy's in this movie.
Pryor is kind of all over the place. So now with his own troubles, at the time.
Of course.
So, but it's at times, now he's so funny that it supersedes some of it sometimes. But it is very uneven. And I think Candy helps kind of ground that a little bit more and keep things on the rails a little bit.
Absolutely. I want to get more to Candy, but quick diversion. Was this before or after the MS diagnosis? Like, when did that happen for Richard Pryor?
I don't know the answer to that.
Because obviously the deterioration started before he knew. And this movie, I've always felt like, maybe I'm wrong, it was there's a point, and it could have been just because of the fire that happened in the 70s he lived through. There was a point when he was making movies where his voice got weaker and thinner sounding. He still had energy and he was moving around, but the of his voice sounded so thin compared to what it used to be. And I just always wondered, I felt like this was part of it, but I could be wildly wrong. Oh, it was the next year he got diagnosed.
Okay.
So in my mind, if you're being diagnosed the next year, it's probably starting to get you. And I've felt like that in this, which is such a downer thing to talk about in a very fun and very funny movie. But I couldn't help myself but feel like I noticed that when I watch it. I will give you the money totals. This had a budget of $15 million and had a box office gross of $45 million. So a very nice big hit for them, which I think matters with him on the poster. And frankly, the fact that it did what it did, it came in third on its debut weekend against Rambo 2 and View to Kill, the James Bond movie. So You're doing okay if you're coming in third against those in 1985. Those are fucking big
Mm-hmm.
blockbuster budget movies. Um, Looking up for any possible reviews or things I need to know. Here's what staggers me about this, right? Did you see the Rotten Tomatoes score?
No, is it low?
Very,
Yeah.
38%, which, and the Metacritic is low too, 37.
I think this depends on you and me when we saw it too. I
Well,
think
I was a
that,
kid, you were a
yeah,
kid.
right. So I think that plays into it, giving us a more favorable enjoyment of this movie than than potentially critics at the time or since.
What else did Walter Hill direct? That name sounds so familiar. Because there's a quote from him in the wiki saying this is he doesn't mean it in a bad way, but this is a career aberration for him directing a screwball comedy. So I need to look up what else he's
Hmm.
done. Oh my gosh. Screwball comedy. Yes, comedy there. He did Red Heat, 48 Hours, another 48 Hours. But he also
Oh, right.
did The Warriors, and he directed a bunch of episodes of Deadwood. So he's doing just
Hmm.
fine. He's 83 now, still with us. Oh, and a graduate of Michigan State University. This is a really quick deep dive on Walter Hill. Very impressive. I knew the name. I was very surprised. But moving on to, let's go with another full film, Volunteers. And this is one of the ones I rewatched because
Okay.
I remembered this one as a kid, but like couldn't remember. I had weird memories of mixing this as a kid. I recognized it much later of this with like Joe versus the Volcano
Okay.
because of Tom Hanks and all the travel and
Right.
everything going on. It is a wildly different movie. Tom Hanks put on like your waspy rich guy accent of like, oh, Higgins, blah, blah, blah. Oh, what are you talking about? He lies about who he is to
Yep.
escape a gambling debt, and he goes into the Peace Corps, where John Candy is actually joining the Peace Corps,
Mm-hmm.
and it's them traversing. Is it a Hope Crosby thing? Like, what are we trying to do here?
Maybe, but I mean, I feel like the one person doesn't get usually separated in a lot of those, right? Like
That's true. He doesn't
the
get brainwashed into being a communist spy as John
right.
Candy's Tom Tuttle does. You're absolutely correct. You
I'm
don't
not sure
remember the
what the
Manchurian Candidate
comparison.
remake with Hope and Crosby, where Bob Hope had to assassinate the president and Bing Crosby had to stop him? Loved that movie.
Yes.
Can I make that an AI right now?
Holiday Inn, yeah, or whatever. Was that what? Is that the two of them? So are they?
Yeah. I mean, if you really
The
want
German skin.
The Hope and Crosby pastiche is Spies Like Us, which we've talked about before. But
Yes.
anyway, you were saying, I apologize. What were you saying about Volunteers?
A very unique premise, I guess. Like this was a different take on something that I hadn't seen. I just trying to, like you said, play off that teaming up that seemed to work so well in Splash. They throw them together again to see what happens, just in a different place, kind of different location.
And wildly
I,
different
I
styles of roles for them too. They're both
yeah,
playing wildly different types of people here. No gut reaction if you remember liking it or not, basically.
right, yeah. When I went back and looked at the plot, I was like, oh, I sort of vaguely remember some of these parts, and I did remember John Candy being brainwashed, but that's about the extent of it. So if you have more insight, please. You
No,
just watched it, so yeah, go
no,
for it.
I would say, unfortunately, even though I just watched it, you're actually barking up the right tree of it is unmemorable. It
Hmm.
is fine. It is not
Okay.
bad. It is fine. It is not a bad movie. It had a budget of $10 million. It grossed about $20 million. Double its money. What else do you want from something, right? It's funny enough, but it meanders. It doesn't, if you're going to reunite these two, you don't always want to play the hits, but I think this was too much of a swing for
Yeah.
reuniting these two, especially because I think Tom Hanks is incredibly miscast. There was
Hmm.
a moment, I'd have to look at his career, where I felt like they might, you know, when Bradley Cooper had that weird run of playing really smug people,
Yeah.
I felt like they tried to do that to Tom Hanks very briefly. But thankfully he had Big to turn it all around. So, which really worked out for him. I also really like the pedigree of this movie, which fascinates me because it was written by David Isaacs and Ken Levine, who did MASH and Cheers and worked on The
Hmm.
Simpsons.
Okay.
So it baffles me that this movie is not funnier than it is with
Yeah.
that. The music is by James Horner, selected because it was directed by Nicholas Meyer. Have you ever seen the movie Time After Time?
No.
Worth a watch. It is not a huge blockbuster film, but it kind of started his career. You may remember it. Malcolm McDowell as H.G. Wells in the 1800s accidentally time travels to the present, and he accidentally brings Jack the Ripper with him. But it's like a sci-fi film. It's really good.
Okay.
Highly recommended. And I also like Nicholas Meyer because he directed Star Trek 2 and 6, my two favorites, and he co-wrote them, and he's the best, and he's so good, and he understood Star Trek in a really good way. And he also directed The Day After, the TV movie from 1983 about, all the nuclear fears. Like, when you really look at that, like, jokes about Star Trek aside, that's a really good career that he's built for himself right there.
Right.
He co-wrote the screenplay for Fatal Attraction. When you
so
look at
there's a lot of talent and star power involved in this movie
for a movie that is fine, which is fascinating. Yeah. So, sorry, I went on a tangent because I really like to talk about Nicholas Meyer because I've actually looked at. This isn't a Star Trek thing. A quick tangent aside, because of Star Trek, I think he got pigeonholed for someone who is really creative and can do a lot more than just Star Trek. What he did in Star Trek is amazing, but when you look at everything else he's done. He hasn't directed a movie, I think, in like 5 or 6 years or maybe longer. He's done some TV show stuff. And to me, it's a waste of talent for what I've seen from him.
Gotcha.
So that's why I wanted to get into that. Believe me, I could talk Wrath of Khan all day, but I know better with you. We'll do it in another episode. Somehow, some way, you're going to let me do that.
All that being right. All that being said, this made, double its budget. So, I mean, it's not a hit, but it didn't lose money, so it's not a bomb. So
finally, we will talk his last movie in 1985, Sesame Street's Follow That Bird. And I don't want to approach this as a gag. Like, this was a movie.
We got one more too, so
we do.
We didn't talk Summer Rental yet.
Son of a bitch! I thought Summer Rental was
for
the
record.
Year.
I don't really care if we talk about Summer Rental. I don't like that movie.
No,
so.
I just had it listed for next year for some reason. Son of a bitch! I'm angry at me. I did it again. No, let's talk Summer Rental. We have to. Then we'll finish it out with a movie I like. Because I also don't like Summer Rental. Why don't you like Summer Rental?
I think this is really the first kind of real dog of his career. It's kind of hack, a bunch of bits put together. I think that there are better executions of this idea of a movie. I think One Crazy Summer is a better sailing and beach. I think that's a better fun version of that. I think Family Summer Getaways is done better by him in The Great Outdoors in a couple years. Like, it just, there are much better versions of this movie out there for this one to be out there. So
here's my question to you. Did you look up who directed this movie? Because does it weird you out or give you any pause or give any thought, considering the track record we've been talking about, that this pairs John Candy with Carl Reiner directing?
Oh.
Which doesn't that feel like a surprise considering the quality of this film?
Yeah. Boy, he's usually a lot better at narrative structure than this. So
you say that, but please remember The Man with Two Brains and Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, which we've already talked about.
Maybe not. He's fooled us all.
I say, I wonder, is there a point where somebody's falling off? And I actually want to look at his director credits to see when is the last time writer, producer. Why can't I find his directing credits, motherfucker? Then it hits the movie Summer School, starring, I believe, Mark Harmon and Kirstie Alley, which is not great, as I recall. Then he hits, after that, a movie called Burt Rigby, You're a Fool, which I don't even remember. And then in my mind, it all falls apart because he does one of those truly terrible post-Naked Gun parodies. I didn't know he wrote, or didn't know he directed this. He directed Fatal Instinct, the Basic Instinct Fatal Attraction parody. The last good movie I think Carl Reiner directed was All of Me, because it's all downhill from here. That's rough.
Wow.
But back to John Candy and Summer Rental. The only thing noteworthy here is that it's got music by Alan Silvestri, the same year he did the music for Back to the Future.
No.
So that's like, what a year. What a year. Isn't that wild? Finally, Follow That Bird. which I loved as a kid. It was adorable. It was fun.
Likewise.
It was great seeing all the celebrities that popped up because you also have Chevy Chase, Joe Flaherty, Waylon Jennings, Dave Thomas, Sandra Bernhardt. I remember as the
Yeah.
Grouch Diner, who's basically Oscar the Grouch in human form along with the
Yeah.
cook. It's just a fun movie that takes Big Bird out of Sesame Street. He's a Big Bird who is stolen from Sesame Street to be sold to a wealthy family who's collecting birds. I remember now. And that's me
Yeah.
without going to the wiki. Now I'm going to the wiki. So I'm very proud of myself for getting there.
There's the bluebird part, right? The singing giant bluebird or whatever.
Because I'll always remember that John Candy's part shows up where he pulls over Dave Thomas and Joe Flaherty, who are the people who kidnap Big Bird, and he's the cop, and he basically stops them and helps. He doesn't directly help Big Bird get away because Big Bird already escaped, but he slows them down and gives them time to help figure this out. Isn't that nice? Very good. This is another one, though, where it's a small John Candy part, but he's credited. His face and name are on the poster. So
Nice.
I know they did that with a lot of celebrities, especially in Muppet and Sesame Street style movies, but it's big enough to count. And in a year where he's already done 3 other movies where he's the lead, this is just a nice little, I don't know what, cherry on top scenario, right?
Yes, agreed.
Any other final thoughts on this? It's not a lot to talk about. It's just a fun little movie I'd like to mention.
I think you nailed it.
Yay. Who actually directed this? It's not directed by Henson or Oz, but they do the Muppet performances as they would. Oh, the guy who directed this would later direct The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, Ken Kwapis. So isn't that fun?
Oh, that's a name. Did you do anything else? That's a name I recognize.
A lot of sitcoms. Malcolm in the Middle, The Office, The Bertie Mac Show. He worked on Freaks and Geeks. He's just that into you. Oh, he directed the Kevin Bacon movie He Said, She Said. So yeah, he's had a nice little career. He's not blowing the doors down, but he's doing just fine.
There we go.
Good for him. Then we move on to Steve Martin's 1985, which is interesting because aside from only being one movie, this is unfortunately, let me confirm, there's 2 others later on that are bolded. I bolded the ones I hadn't seen. I have not seen Movers and Shakers. I hadn't even heard of Movers and Shakers.
Likewise, it's a cameo anyway, right?
Is it? Okay, so I wasn't sure. I know I watched the trailer, and it didn't seem like he was in it. Like, I didn't see him in the trailer.
Yeah.
It was, unless I'm thinking of a different movie where I didn't see him in the trailer. No, it is just a cameo. But he's credited, and it doesn't say cameo on his IMDb, which is always the... If IMDb doesn't say uncredited or cameo, I just go with it. Unless we should disavow it. Would you rather... John Candy's clearly getting the win anyway. But do you want to even...
Since I can't really speak to it, and I don't even think it's going to be much of anything, I think it's fine anyway. It's not like this is a controversial pick to say that John Candy gets 85, so yeah.
So I lost my count. What's that put us at?
1, 2, 3, 4 to 2. 4 to 2.
4 to 2, John Candy's favor. And then we move to 1986, where let's get the first intersection out of the way.
All right.
Where John Candy and Steve Martin are both credited. John Candy's part is way smaller than Steve Martin's. He doesn't get a song, but Little Shop of Horrors is 1986. To be fair to the cameo range, this is littered with comedic bit parts suddenly showing up. So I don't really devalue John Candy showing up here. It's Rick Moranis' film, obviously, but lots of bit parts. But if you were to credit who gets more out of this, it's obviously Steve Martin.
Absolutely, yeah. In a 1-for-1 since totally.
If you were to look at the other movies Steve Martin did, we talked about it in the Chevy Chase one, but let's talk more about what Steve Martin works on this. Three Amigos, which I fucking adore. I love Three Amigos.
You and I are simpatico here.
But it was not beloved at the time. I think this movie has aged very well for people, but I think it's weirdly a movie that was at the hype of it. It had a budget of $25 million. It only grossed 39.2, so it made money. But I think this is the movie that people thought was going to make $100 million plus. Steve Martin, Martin Short, Chevy Chase, produced and co-written by Lorne Michaels, co-written by, Steve Martin and Randy Newman. Randy Newman doing the music.
Yep.
My God, this is going to be the biggest comedy movie of all time. That's fine. But kids who grew up with it and fond memories, and people love it.
Yeah, I don't get it. It's great.
Yeah,
I've watched it recently and still adore it. There's so much just silliness and fun, and it has, there's a tying theme to it. There's a couple, yeah, there's trying to be some redemption on characters that aren't very redeemable, and but I don't know. It's just really funny too. It's really funny. The three original songs that Randy Newman wrote are awesome, and just this is a really, really good time and a really fun movie. Plus, I have the nostalgia of another one that I wore out the videotape of and then watched over and over and can probably recite most of. Um, it's great, and Steve Martin leads the charge. There are technically the three leads, but I think Lucky is the leader of the three.
a few funny notes about this. By the way, I didn't mention John Landis directed this, who also directed the Blues Brothers.
Sure.
This is pre Coming to America, so he hasn't quite hit his decline, which would come after that. But it is post Twilight Zone, the movie. He was actually on trial for what happened during the Twilight Zone tragedy. You could only edit the movie at night. And apparently the studio took final cut after he handed over the first draft to the movie, which you do wonder, does that influence anything? Looking at a few fun trivia bits, at one point Steven Spielberg was slated to direct. He wanted Steve Martin, Bill Murray, and Robin Williams. Belushi had originally been included because this is how far this project had been in development.
Right.
When Belushi had dropped out, well, I say dropped out, I think he passed away. Why did I say it that way? Fascinating thing about the part being offered to John Candy, he then recommended Martin Short. So that's amazing that you could have had in 1986 two team up movies, right? And the first team up coming years earlier than Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Now, I'm glad it didn't happen, both because Martin Short is amazing in this movie, and it started the Martin Short-Steve Martin friendship that is still paying off to this day for media and fans of comedy. So that worked out real well. Any other final thoughts before we pivot over to John Candy?
And it's not related to him specifically. The only other note that I found out that I did not know about is there apparently were deleted scenes with Sam Kinison as a mountain man in this movie that have been lost to time, which would have been fascinating to find. But
I missed that. Those aren't on a DVD or anywhere?
No, I think they shot them, but I don't know if they got rid of them or whatever. But
that's a real shame. That's a real shame.
That would have been a fascinating thing to encounter as they were trying to go out to Setapolco.
You know what? We have used this website a few times before, Lost Media Wiki, and there it is. It's got a big old write-up on the Lost Media website. That's apparently Landis was interested in putting Kinison's scene on as a DVD extra. However, when he inquired to the studio about the footage, alongside other deleted material, they replied they had misplaced the footage and were unsure where it had went to. To this day, the footage has not reappeared, though Landis says he's still searching for it.
Interesting.
So can you imagine if that shows up one day? We pivot over to John Candy for 1986. We already talked Little Shop of Horrors, which was the cameo and shared movie. Then we go to his leading role in Armed and Dangerous. Any thoughts on Armed and Dangerous?
Not a fan. It is kind of rough, I think.
I absolutely agree. And it's this problem where I realize they're still teaming up John Candy with Eugene Levy and Harold Ramis apparently co-wrote some of this, and they're trying to.
He took his name off it as executive producer. He was that's how bad, annoyed he was with it.
Is this? There was another one. No, this is the one we talked about in the Harold Ramis thing. He tried to take his name off of it. This is where.
No, as writer he tried, but could not. But as executive producer, they let him take it off. So.
Because is this the one, or is it another one where they said if he took his name off it completely, it would hurt the film? Yeah. That's another one where they had done it, or was it this one?
No, I think that was this one.
Okay. But man, that's rough stuff.
Premise doesn't work. It felt very flawed, and I think most people agree. This is a terrible score on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think it made its budget back, but barely. So when that's not a great thing. So
$12 million budget, $15 million box office, which it's funny to me because this does show maybe John Candy has buzz, but then word of mouth after week one just kills it immediately.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, I wanted to see it, but it was really fucking bad. You're right. It has a 9% on Rotten Tomatoes. The director says the movie came out okay. I was not used to working with comedians. I wanted to tell a story, but they didn't care about any of that. They just wanted to be funny, which I think
Well,
speaks to what you're talking about.
it's pretty evident.
Is that a failing on his part to not
Mm,
wrangle them in? I think about, I hate to bring this up, but like movies like the Ghostbusters remake in 2016, where the director, Paul Feig, basically is like, I let them ad lib. We have an hour of just cut ad lib scenes. It's like, rein them in, script it, make it funny,
right.
plot it
Yeah.
tightly, rein them in. Yes, they're funny, but you need framework, you need structure, even in comedy. So that's 1986. It's funny, neither movie did great. Little Shop of Horrors, what was the, obviously we can't really count this, but what was the budget and take for Little Shop of Horrors? Do you have that handy? If
I
not, I'll
did
look it
not.
up.
I didn't check that, to be honest with you. But 20.
$25 million
Yep.
budget, $54 million box office, which is double, but I also remember, I think I've just watched a lot of DVD documentaries. This was also considered a disappointment at the time.
Mm,
All of these movies were not the big hits they wanted them to be, but between the two, for Steve Martin versus John Candy, Three Amigos is a better movie than Armed and Dangerous, and Steve
yes.
Martin has a better, bigger part in Little Shop of Horrors. So this becomes a Steve Martin win,
Yeah.
which I believe makes it, 4-3 now?
4-3. Yep.
It's really a tight battle, all things considered,
Hmm.
especially since they've both only had one default year. And
Right.
I felt like when we did our Arnold versus Sly battle, there were a lot more default years than I wanted in that battle.
Yes.
So that
This
really
they
annoyed.
are working in this time in their this portion of their career for sure.
So we go to 1987, and since I did it with Little Shop of Horrors, I guess I should start
Yep.
1987 with the combo movie.
Yeah.
The movie, maybe the
What a
movie
movie.
that's all about why we would even do this. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It's funny. It's got heart. They both are giving absolute top tier performances. It's John Hughes at the height of his fucking powers. Everything about this movie works. This is a holiday classic. This is a movie that people talk about to this day. It gets replayed. It gets replayed and replayed and replayed. It gets quoted. I like me, Randy.
Yeah.
Randy doesn't like me. My cat likes me. But, but
Yes.
what can you say? What do you want to say? But what can you also say that hasn't already been said a million times?
Yeah, this was another gear for Candy we hadn't seen yet. And arguably like for Steve Martin too. Like because of
100%.
that, it brought that out in him. So he was, I mean, he was much more the straight man in this regard and trying to be the reactionary, but then finding the heart towards the end. So there's a lot of different places he goes in this, and Candy just kind of leads him there. It's a wonderful pairing, and they play off each other so well. I the only thing I want to say just is I want a fucking car right fucking now, but just because that's just because I think I've said it before, but the first time I ever saw this movie, I was like probably 12 or 13 or something, maybe not even that old, and was wondering why this movie was rated R for the first like 60% of it. And then that scene comes on. There it is. And it's brilliant. Like just it's so great. Especially the final thing of, do you have this? Nope, you're fucked. I mean, it's just
It's
awesome.
it's it's fascinating because thinking about that, without that scene, is this a PG or a
Yeah,
very light
probably.
PG-13?
Yeah.
Probably a PG, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But man, it's really good. Siskel and Ebert loved it. 2 thumbs up. Gene Siskel, much like you, uh, Candy's best role to date. And yeah, it's true. This is everything he's done has been fun and good. This is tour de force, acting, comedy, emotion. 93% on Rotten
Yeah.
Tomatoes, 72 on Metacritic. This movie is beloved. But what's funny is this movie made money, right? $15 million budget, 49.5 million box office gross. This is a movie, much like Christmas Story, I'll say it, that benefited from the TBS era. Let's play it on cable. It's the holiday season. Let's put it on TV. this movie was liked and well received. This movie became a classic because of cable television. Is my gut reaction. I don't know if that's a hot take. It probably is not.
I think that's right. Yeah, it just because, and it became one of those. I don't know if it got like passed down from people just felt really strongly about it, and it was one of those. It was sort of known because of the two main characters in it, but I felt like it got more throughout the 90s and early 2000s because of just not word of mouth, but was passed along by people that felt so passionately about it. I guess that's a way to say that. So it got a bigger and better audience because the people that liked it really liked it and were like, you have to see this movie.
Any other final thoughts on Planes, Trains, and Automobiles before we move to, I suppose we should do Steve Martin's Roxanne in 1987.
I will say I'm glad that it is not just that movie for this, because it would be really hard to pick. I would almost be like cheating and being like, can we give them both a point if it was it? But it's not. So please go on.
I absolutely agree. I think it's a 1-for-1 on that. It's such a banner thing. It's so amazing. It's so great. I would have called it a tie. I would have somehow given them. I would have given you that.
I think I have to. Yeah.
Because I think we've even played that game for other movies where someone's in both movies, or like they're both in a movie. But I think in that situation, and I can't remember it clearly, I think it was Bill Murray, Chevy Chase, where they had wildly different sizes of roles. So you were able to kind of pick who should get credit for it. This is a two-man's shop right here. This is
totally
blow for blow. So there's no way to separate. But Roxanne for Steve Martin. I weirdly saw this movie a lot as a kid. I don't know why. I remember seeing it several times. It was very clearly in my memory. And also,
was it on cable or HBO a lot? I mean,
it's probably the way. So many of these Steve Martin movies and John Candy movies did become cable hits too. But this is a proper, well-grossing hit. This had almost the same gross as Planes, Trains. What did I just say the budget was for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles? Son of a bitch.
25, right? Was that
$15 million budget
15, yep.
with a $49.5 million gross, right?
Yeah, correct.
Oh, that's comparable. I was thinking it was a higher budget. Roxanne had a $12 million budget and $40 million gross. It's actually pretty comparable, all things considered. So Steve Martin, box office-wise, having a pretty damn good year, really.
Very much so.
Daryl Hannah hitting that romantic comedy vibe, coming off a Splash. Did she have something in between? She probably did. A couple of movies, a romantic comedy. Oh, we covered this in Ivan Reitman, Legal Eagles with Robert Redford, which I remember did not blow the doors down, but did okay. That was her.
She wasn't in Wall Street, was she?
She was, but that was same year. So I was looking at the between Splash and this movie. So good year for Daryl Hannah, Roxanne and Wall Street.
Yeah.
Lots going on there. But back to Roxanne. This is Cyrano de Bergerac. This is somebody's really fucking ugly, and they find a pretty person to tell the person they have a crush all the things they want to say, but they do it with a little more heart and a little funnier, and Steve Martin has a really, really big makeup comedic nose, which does drive a bit of the comedy, but it has so much heart, and it has really good source material, obviously, that you get away with it.
The more of the whimsy comedy drama mix is at play here. He starts to mine that a lot more, which we'll see a lot more coming soon.
Is this, when I had mentioned All of Me, it starts setting him up for the future and roles. Now that we're in 1987, am I talking out of my ass that Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and Roxanne, only a couple years later, when you look at development cycles, could have been based out of that? Or is it just he's a big star in these? Am I wrong to have thought that, or what do you think?
I think he had to get there, right? So I think that the development has certainly helped to get to this point, whereas he's not able to make, I think, these kind of movies in 1983, right?
Absolutely.
Like it's that evolution as an actor is starting to come into play and is evident. So because it's a movie that, again, has good source material and interesting, but could be played for ridiculousness or almost too over the top, is played very sweetly. And
Yeah.
it's a pretty charming movie.
Yeah, well said. But
yeah, I was about to go there.
But as much as it is a very charming movie that did make some money,
it's not me wrong,
it's not Spaceballs. Now, to be fair, Roxanne made more money than Spaceballs because they both made $40 million, and Spaceballs had a budget of $25 million. But also, I think Spaceballs...
I don't care.
Neither do I. It's funnier. It's got a more dynamic performance, frankly, from John Candy, strictly, who's going all out. It's also, it has legs that Roxanne doesn't have. People are still talking about Spaceballs.
Absolutely.
People are not talking about Roxanne. There's a legacy, a comedic legacy that this built the aura around John Candy. Roxanne was a fine romantic comedy film that Steve Martin also made. This is another one of those ones where we could just quote all day, but we know better. This is another one of the all-timers where we're like, this just contributes. John Candy put out Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and Spaceballs in the same year. What a fucking year for him.
And it's another one of those too that, I mean, Roxanne's on. I haven't seen it in probably 15 whatever years, or even probably more than that. I'd be like, oh, okay, and I may tune into it. If Spaceballs is on, I will watch it.
Yeah,
I don't care where, or I might put it on voluntarily. There is just, it's, once it started, like, well, I guess I'm not going anywhere.
Absolutely agreed. Funny thing, it might be our generation thing. It's only got a 52% on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics were not in love with it. And
I don't think it came out either.
Right. Cinema Score's got like a B-. A lot of the modern stuff, Roger Ebert didn't really love it. But maybe it's the world we live in. Maybe we're in a bubble. But to me, everyone I've ever met and known and talked to, this movie is beloved. Is it just a cult following film? I feel like it's bigger than that. Who knows? Or is any film that bombed and gets popularity considered a cult following?
I mean, it certainly helps too by this is prime real estate for on cable all the time, or you take this from the whatever and then just watch it over and over. It's really, some Mel Brooks movies, you have to be really socially conscious to understand all of the jokes and understand historical references and things like that. This, you just kind of had to know about Star Wars, and even if you didn't,
it's funny.
There's enough stupid sight gags in this that it's hilarious, and so it's lowest common denominator, but in a great way. And so it just is consistently funny, and again, all the lines that everyone quote are really funny lines. So it's not just there's a reason that it's immensely quotable. So I must be that it's just in our wheelhouse, but I agree. I don't know a lot of people that have seen this that say I don't get it.
Exactly. Only other little bit of trivia I'll have specific for this episode is Rick Moranis suggested John Candy for the role of Barf.
Wow.
And I feel like somehow there's some symmetry there, considering that, Rick Moranis got the Ghostbusters and blah, blah, blah. I'm probably overthinking it. The only other thing I want to say for us is if you want to hear more of our thoughts on Mel Brooks, again, in the audio archives, these are the old audio-only episodes. Dig in. We did a whole Mel Brooks retrospective IMDb breakdown of just Mel Brooks. Yep. So, and it's a pretty fun episode, as I recall. So go back and find that sumbitch. So, to me, tell me if I'm wrong, this is now a 5-3 battle to John Candy's favor because Spaceballs has given him the point. If suddenly you're like, well, I love it, but Mike, you're wrong, you tell me now.
No, this is a John Candy point for me too.
1988. Yep. This could be controversial.
I'll be curious.
I'm going to rip the Band-Aid and say all the films real quick, because I want to talk about them, but I don't know if this is controversial or not, and I feel like it is. John Candy in 1988 did The Great Outdoors, which is a very good, another John Hughes, right? Or is it just that vibe?
No, I thought it was.
Yeah, it is. It is, right?
Yeah.
No, He's pretty much only working with John Hughes for several years at this point, I feel like, except for Hot to Trot, which I just discovered last night exists. We'll get into that in a second.
I'm sorry.
But in reality, Hot to
Yeah, John
Trot, we'll
Hughes,
set
yeah.
aside. It's The Great Outdoors versus Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Mhm.
And I feel like, and you don't have to answer yet, but I want to say it now. I feel like you're going to like The Great Outdoors more than Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and I like Dirty Rotten Scoundrels more than The Great Outdoors.
You're incorrect.
Hot damn, let's talk about why then. Let's start with John Candy and talk about The Great Outdoors, which is not a bad movie. So I think this is another one of those movies where this happens a lot with Dan Aykroyd, I feel like, in the 80s. Motherfuckers, you needed to trade parts. So John Candy should have been the Dan Aykroyd role, and Dan Aykroyd should have been the John Candy role.
And it's too much of a turn when he has to care about his family, I think. Like it's John Candy can kind of either play that role, or I mean, they could have written it so where he is like in spite of his family, in spite of him, does something heartwarming or whatever. Yeah.
I think it's weird. The thing I remember most about this movie is the fucking credit scene where they're all just dancing the Land of a Thousand Dances in the bar and having a good time. Maybe because it's the most fun everybody's having, so it really stuck with me. Oh, and I do remember the scene where John Candy has to eat the 96-ounce steak. Because I think that was my introduction to food challenges, and I was a very fat child, and I thought I could do that. I could do that, definitely.
Oh, God, followed by the raccoons.
Yes. So there's a lot going on there. And there are funny moments. It's another one where it's funny moments. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but it is inferior to future and past John Hughes, John Candy collaborations. It is not Dan Aykroyd at his best, and he's really on his downward spiral. It starts in the late 80s, and he doesn't super recover. We'll get there again. We talk about it a ton. Although I don't know if we've talked about it on video yet, so that's very exciting.
There we go.
you know what I'm going for. We'll get there. Longtime fans will know if I say these. But it's just not it. And did you find a budget for this movie? I saw the box office was $43.5 million. I didn't see a budget for The Great Outdoors. Did you?
I didn't find one, but if I had to guess, it's in that 15 mil range.
Yeah, it would make sense. I do wonder.
There wasn't anything over the top that they shot, you know?
I sometimes think with post Ghostbusters, mid 80s Dan Aykroyd probably cost money, which I sometimes go for. Because, he was still a name at this point.
I just think a location's not ridiculous for this. You don't have to make a whole bunch of elaborate sets or anything like that. You just go to a.
You're absolutely right. And when you look at most of these other John Hughes movies, they all hit that similar budget range. You're absolutely right. Good call. Now, Hot to Trot. I did not know this movie existed until about 24 hours ago at time of recording.
This is one you had mentioned, The Man with Two Brains. You remembered the front of the poster or the front of the cassette, or VHS. That I always remembered Hot to Trot, and it should have been my local video store right in my small town. This was before Blockbuster came in. They had a local video store, and they had little tags next to it, and new releases were whatever, $3, and then other ones that were a little bit older were, I think, like $1.99 or something like that. And then there was the one other color of tag that was the bargain ones. Hot to Trot was always a bargain one. And I always got curious, being like, oh, Bobcat Goldthwait, who I didn't really know at the time. I guess I'd seen One Crazy Summer at that point with the horse. I'm like, I wonder what this movie is.
The Police Academy sequel, sir. The Police Academy sequel.
And I never gave into it, but I was always curious. And then I forgot. I think I watched it in college at one point. It was just like, holy shit, this is bad.
I only watched the trailer. And it's interesting to me because when I first looked at the Wikipedia, I was really confused. I was like, is John Candy uncredited? No. He's very much credited. He's all over the film. He's in the trailer, which I watched. And I wanted this to be, when I first saw it, before I read anything, I was like, I liked Mr. Ed growing up on Nick at Night. Maybe this is some modern, hilarious adult version of Mr. Ed. No, it's deeply unfunny by all accounts.
Yes.
This is a great quote. In 2011, Bobcat Goldthwait said in the interview, he got the script for Hot to Trot and wrote, "Why would I do this?" on the cover, to which his manager responded by writing a $sign. By the way, we put the cover up for the video, people. Have we said what this movie fucking is? John Candy voices a talking horse. I said Mr.
Yes.
Ed if it didn't connect. And he can only be heard by Bobcat Goldthwait, who is an investment broker because it's the late 80s. I didn't actually say that. This one, you need a plot description. Yeah. Holy shit.
Yeah, and it's important to know that he also, because he's of his times in the stables, knows all the stock tips, the talking horse. So that's what helps Bobcat Goldthwait ascend.
Because all the rich people at like the horse races, right? Yeah,
yep, exactly.
I only gathered that from the trailer, but my goodness. I can't believe John Candy agreed to do this. Is there a reason? Apparently, he also improvised all his dialogue and ignored the script. but poor test screenings kept pushing the release back. It ultimately got released over a year after filming was completed. He apparently recorded his dialogue in mid-1987. Can you imagine if this has dragged down his 1987?
Oh.
Instead, it's going to be in a year. He'll probably lose anyway.
Yes.
I'm looking for anything else. It was a Razzie Award winner because, of course, it was. Tim Kazurinsky is also in it, which makes me laugh because that means it's a Police Academy reunion with Bobcat Goldthwait.
Mm-hmm.
They're really hitting that hard Police Academy money right there. The last thing I'll say, $9 million budget, $6.4 million gross. This lost a lot of money. Oh, sorry, one more thing. This was scored by Danny Elfman the year before he did Batman. So, things can always seem worse than they really are. You're going to be okay. So, what if he secretly had like the early thought of like the early themes in there? Because no one saw this movie. Like you turn it on and as the horse races are beginning, you're like, you're like, what the fuck is that? And you see Bobcat Goldthwait. He's like, oh my God, my horse is going to win. And you just hear John Candy, oh, I'm doing it. And then all of a sudden he's like, it's like, oh my God, this horse race is amazingly scored. This fake movie we made for them is better than what
much
they
better than
did.
the actual movie. So,
but then, even though we gave it away, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels for Steve Martin, 1988.
Tour de force.
The funniest he's been. And that includes Three Amigos, which I love. This is Steve Martin just being funny because he does it in a skeevy way. He's not the romantic lead. Michael Caine's the real romantic lead of this movie. And that helps so much because Steve Martin, between the two of them being Con Man, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Steve Martin's the worst scoundrel. He is fucking gross in this movie in the best way. He's so funny. He's so terrible. This movie just fucking works on every level.
It's it's not quite a caper, but it has that element to it, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just the kind of twists and turns of who one-ups the other to be the best scam artist. And it's just there's so much that's great about it. Again, this also helps from the fact of when I watched it as a kid, and there was plenty that Rupert the Monkey Boy, I'm sure, is still super funny. I always used to get I forget which ESPN anchor would do it, but anytime they would talk about highlights with Oklahoma, he would always go Oklahoma, 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 and that always made me like really laugh because I'm like, I don't know if anybody gets this, but I do. And
without guessing or without knowing, I'm just going to say Kenny Mayne. That's my guess.
I think it was Adnan Berg, but who was a noted cinephile. I think he does a lot of.
You mean 3-week tenured Raw announcer Adnan Virk?
Oh yeah. Yes, sure.
Sorry, he got fired from WWE like in less than a month.
Oh, I did not know that. So
he took over as the new voice of Monday Night Raw, and in a month they were like, nah. So.
But in any event, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels is just a lot of fun. It looks like a lot of fun. There's just the premises keep kind of twisting and turning. really fun performances. And like you said, we get to let Steve Martin loose because in Three Amigos, he had to be, the more not stoic, but he had to be the straight man while Chevy and more importantly Martin Short got to be ridiculous. And here he gets to be ridiculous because he is trying to one up Michael Caine, and that's the way that he can one up this suave, debonair British guy, is that he has to do it by pulling out every dirty trick he has in the book.
And it's wonderful. And also an all-timer perfect ending in my mind too, with how it works out for them.
Yeah.
And what it turns out with the twist with the woman. Like, every aspect of this works, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that this is in Frank Oz's golden period of the 80s, yep, where he directed Dark Crystal, Muppets Take Manhattan, Little Shop of Horrors, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and then he would start the 90s strong with a movie I don't love, but you do, I think, but about Bob. Mm-hmm. And we can go from there, but that's a hell of a run right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, he's Yoda.
No, but I'm on the same page with giving Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. I guess, yeah, I'm not going to count she's having a baby for John Candy there because all that was.
I thought that one was listed as uncredited, which is why I didn't put it.
Yeah, okay, which it is. It's his character from Great Outdoors giving baby names during the credits. That doesn't count.
Yeah, no, that doesn't count. That was the type of cameo I ignore because it's officially uncredited. It was not a thing. But Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. It's funny with these movies in the 80s with these. People talk about the theater now, and now with inflation, it would have to be a higher total anyway. But people talk about missing a mid-budget movie that you could just go see. It doesn't have to be the biggest thing of all time. And I can't see a budget here, but this is another $40 million gross. And with the location shooting, maybe you put it at a Spaceballs $25 million, right? But that's a mid-budget movie where they're making $15 to $20 million off of it. Put that money in your pocket, go make another movie. And that's great. You get all these gems where people can make films, make enough profit to keep it happy. You don't have to make all the money in the world to keep the lights on. This is what is missing from cinema. This is not an original thought, but it needs to be said. It needs to keep being said, I feel like.
I would agree. Yeah, and it's another one of those, I think, that continues to just age well. Mm-hmm. So it's liked more and more as it continues on. So this is one of those you bring it up, and maybe we're just in our own bubble in our own age range where this really spoke to us at the time, and so we love it, but it also a lot of people in this age range think the same thing. So we continue to think that it's great.
Fun fact about how good Steve Martin is and how it's amazing to have him in this cut loose role. Apparently, Richard Dreyfuss was sent the script, and though he was intended for the part of Benson, a misunderstanding resulted in him preparing the part of Jameson. So Steve Martin, who had already been asked to play what Michael Caine became, read the Benson part, and Frank Oz liked it so much, he was like, yeah, no, you're doing that. So, and then Michael Caine eventually took the role that Richard Dreyfuss thought he was going to. So, isn't that fun?
Right.
La, 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 la. So, moving on. I really wish I could find a budget, but I'm sure everything we just said was accurate. Feel the excitement. Oh my God, I didn't know this. That movie, The Hustle, with Anne Hathaway and Rebel Wilson, which I never saw, is a remake of this movie.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that either.
Oh my goodness. How did that movie do? Really well. Holy shit. Although if you look at budgets and inflation, possibly comparable, it made $97 million in 2019. I'm going to an inflation calculator. 45. How many zeros in 45 million?
6.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is that enough? Yes. 45 million in 1988 has the same buying power in March 2019 as error. Please use values less than 10,000. Okay, I got to find another calculator. What a fucking tease that was, eh? Oh, comparable. In 1988, which it grossed $45 million, 2019 would have grossed $97 million. Box office gross of The Hustle, $97.4 million.
Okay.
It made the exact same amount of money in theory. That's fascinating.
Interesting.
Yeah, isn't that a fun little tidbit? You wanna make a quick what did I say? $45 million ish? Go remake Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. I'll be waiting.
All right. Great. Yes. Let's go to the French Riviera.
1989 was, sticking with Steve Martin, Parenthood, which I remember liking this movie a lot as a kid or early teen, maybe, because I think I watched it with my family. Just like it was a family film.
Sure.
American family comedy drama, directed again by Ron Howard, starring Steve Martin, Rick Moranis, Keanu Reeves, post Bill and Ted, or after, year after Bill and Ted. So it was just, it's harmless, but also blew the goddamn doors down.
Yes.
$20 million budget. It grossed $126 million.
Yeah.
When this is the era, talking about what I just finished, where your random mid-budget movie, which is what this was, if it connects in just the right way, can become your $100 million blockbuster. Explain to me, because I've never understood it, because it got TV adaptations in 1990 and 2010. How did Parenthood become, and again, I like this movie, how did Parenthood become a $100 million blockbuster in 1989? Make me understand.
Well, this was the time frame when, I mean, this is, you could take anybody to it. And so I think you didn't have to divide and conquer. And so if the parents wanted to go see it, great. This is a movie that had pretty broad appeal. And there were enough like goofy jokes or silly lines that the kids would enjoy it. So I think that's why it got, and it was probably just a lot of the boomers thought it was speaking to them at that point, right? So they had money to spend and were willing to go see a movie that they thought spoke to them. And so I think it's a combination of the two. So it opened the doors, and it hit the right point where I relate to that, but also there are some genuinely funny moments in this too. Like it's not just charm, there's actual funny in there too. And I think that is a really good recipe for broad appeal.
Yeah, I really like this movie quite a bit. It's very good. It says something about a movie that, I mean, I was 6 when this came out. By the time I probably had seen it on TV, because that's not like I saw it in theater, I was probably 8 or 10 years later. But even at that point, I got engrossed in it. I remember being young and liking this movie and being okay with watching this movie. Music by Randy Newman again, by the way. I didn't realize that until just now. It's just, I don't know, one fascinating thing that I didn't realize, because we've actually talked about several of these shows independently in different time frames on different episodes. The 1990 to 1991 TV season was all the same season that had the Ferris Bueller adaptation on NBC, the Uncle Buck adaptation on CBS, which is the one we hadn't talked about, Baby Talk on ABC, which is the Look Who's Talking ripoff. Those all happened in the same TV season.
A lot of original ideas, yeah.
How insane. Those are terrible shows.
Yeah.
All of them. My goodness. Like, who played Uncle Buck? Kevin Meaney in the TV series. We're about to talk Uncle Buck. I'm sorry. But my God, just deeply, deeply terrible shit on TV 1990 to 1991. Maybe that's the next season we should look at on something. We haven't done anyway, my wheels are spinning simply based on how terrible some of this shit is. Any final thoughts on Parenthood?
No, I think it's I think it deserved of a success because it hit the right notes for what it needed, what it was trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Then correct me if I'm wrong, that's Steve Martin's only 1989, right?
Correct. That's it, yeah.
Obviously a very big hit. Very, very big hit. Well regarded, kept getting TV show adaptations. But we pivot over to John Candy, who had 3 movies all in wildly different quality. There is one I haven't seen and hadn't heard of, Speed Zone. Do you know anything about
Hmm.
Speed Zone? Did you do any
So
research on Speed
I
Zone?
did a research of it. It
Mm.
essentially is Cannonball Run like 4 or whatever, or 3. Like it is an extension very loosely of that type of movie.
Hmm.
It has notoriety because Roger Ebert gave it 0 stars.
Fantastic.
0.
I love this.
He usually gives, like I said, a half a star for making a movie.
Yeah.
And 0. So not good is my from my research seems
Uh,
to tell me.
oh, someone who comes up periodically on this show because of Ohio and your roots to Ohio. Jamie Farr cameoing as I'm sure the culturally appropriate Sheikh Abdul Ben Falafel. Oh
Yeah.
Christ. Is the only actor and character from the first 2 Cannonball runs to appear in this movie.
Yep.
So also this continues, looking at this cast list. When has pairing Eugene Levy with John Candy resulted in a good movie yet? SCTV was great, but have they done one movie where I'm like, I want to see that?
We only get, I mean, tangentially we get to count Vacation, but
Eugene Levy's in Vacation.
he's the car salesman.
Oh yeah, that's right. Forgot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess tangentially, but they don't share scenes together.
They're not together.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So
Okay. Wow. This
no.
this is fascinating.
Speed Zone not going to be a high point for John Candy this year.
By the way, $18 million budget, $3 million gross.
Woof.
Woof indeed. That's pretty fucking bad. But moving on, I guess, do you want to go in terms of increasing quality, question mark, increasing
guess,
gross? Yeah. I had not seen Who's Harry Crumb until this week. I'd always remembered the poster because it's the one where he looks like the car sucky with like the suction cups at a window.
Yeah.
It was always a very memorable poster, and I thought, well, maybe it's funny. I texted you. I don't know if you recall. I had to turn this movie off after a half hour. It genuinely gave me a headache. I was a half hour into this deeply unfunny film, and I got a headache and thought, I don't want to do this anymore, and I didn't finish it. That's the quality of Who's Harry Crumb. It's the same joke. I don't know, maybe he improves at minute 32. But the first 30 minutes or so are the same joke of somebody says something. John Candy says, but because of this. And they go, no, because of this. And that's the joke. Repeat it for the first half hour, and I want to blow my fucking brains out. It's terrible. It wants to be The Naked Gun, which came out the year before, I believe. It is not The Naked Gun. It's fucking bad. Yep. But what do you think?
I have not seen this movie since in probably 30 years. And
don't bother.
Really, weirdly enough, remember it being one of those weekends where maybe like my parents were going out to dinner or went away for a weekend or something like that, and I rented a movie with my sister, and we were like, oh, John Candy, Who's Harry Crumb, because we love Spaceballs and Great Outdoors and all that stuff. And we're like, what is this? Especially because the first, I think, isn't like the first couple of minutes of this like in a shower or in a sauna or something? Yeah.
It's like the murder that's setting up the plot. Yeah. It's the catalyst for why they're going to hire the detective.
We're very confused on why this comedy movie about John Candy, the private investigator, was like all about this stuff. So
well, that's what he had to investigate, Randall.
Yeah. It sounds like, as I recall, it was pretty bad. So
again, who knows? Maybe again, a half hour in, it takes the biggest turn I never saw. But I can't find a budget once again. But it did only have an $11 million box office gross, which, based on the budgets of these films at the time and a comedy mystery with different sets and set pieces and things, you got to put this at probably at least $15 million, right? Minimum.
I would think, yeah.
And to have an $11 million gross, that you're not making your money back on this one. At least that's my gut reaction.
27% on Rotten Tomatoes. So yeah, people seem to agree with us. Yeah.
Yep. There you go. And then we get to obviously the big one, the one that is it his legacy movie, you would say, or is that Planes, Trains, and Automobiles? When you think of John Candy, do you think of both of these? Do you think of Uncle Buck? Or do you think of both movies? Do you think of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles? Is this his legacy film? Do you get my meaning by that?
That's probably a good way to say it. Like it's not his primary legacy, but definitely one of his legacy films.
Like, I feel like it's going to be the one if people start naming his films, it's one or two,
Mm-hmm.
possibly. I think the top three would be, in no particular order, I'm not ranking, would be Spaceballs, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and Uncle Buck. This movie did well. It opened number one, $80 million gross. It was number one for 3 weeks. I don't know if I say it didn't make John Candy a movie star because that was Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, but did it solidify him as being able to carry a film by himself?
Yeah, in the right hands, that he could find a way to other people could work off him, right? It wasn't the other way around. He didn't need to. I mean, he's a great additive or player to work off someone else, but he could be the main drawing force on this if he needed to be.
Which, by the way, I don't think he ever recaptured the height of trying to do a movie by himself as the lead. It never happened again to this level. It never worked to this level. Anything he did moving forward that you're like, I loved that, was either a bomb and I loved it, or a bit part and it did well. I will say, talking about the movie for Uncle Buck, there's a British word that they use more casually than we do that I won't say. For Tia, played by Jean Louisa Kelly, she's awful in this movie as a person, and her redemption, I say in quotes, is barely a redemption. Barely earns that redemption scene. She barely earns that hug from her mom. She is terrible in this film to everyone around her. I'm not talking about the actress. I'm talking about the character.
Yep.
She is terrible in this film to everyone around her. She never really learns a lesson, and she only is like, fine, I guess you're okay because you hurt the guy who was mean to me. That said, the kids, Gabby Hoffman and Macaulay Culkin, breathtakingly good. There's a reason Macaulay Culkin got Home Alone off the back of this. There's a reason John Hughes wanted to use him again. He is scene-stealing, charismatic kid. It's one of those things. And I don't want to discredit Maisie, the actress who plays Maisie, either. She's just as adorable and just as fun. We talk often about how I don't like kids and I don't like films with kids and this and that. These two get a pass. They're funny. They're adorable. They steal every scene they're in. They have emotional stakes to things. They do it right. Everyone gets a pass here.
Uncle Buck's approach to them is kind of talking to them more like adults, right? Like, so I think that maybe that's why, like, it's less of a kid to kid kind of approach to it. And then, I know I laugh about it that as jokingly, I've told my son that if he tells me he brushed his teeth, I'm going to go get, like I've used that Uncle Buck trope to say, I've got people that can go check to make sure that you've actually used that and wet that toothbrush.
But now we actually have to analyze the year.
Yep.
If you look at box office performance, it's Steve Martin.
Yeah.
If you look at comparable performances and who's better in their movie, it might be even. If you look at legacy of film, I might give it to Uncle Buck over Parenthood, even though Parenthood, to be fair, Uncle Buck also had 2 failed TV shows. Parenthood actually had a successful TV show of the 2.
Yeah.
Maybe you have an immediate answer in your opinion, but to me this is a little more of a toss-up, trending Steve Martin.
I think I'm in the same boat. I think you can't discount the bad one and the really bad one. Unfortunately, this is an aggregate of everything, and
you're absolutely right.
You have to account for that. If it was Uncle Buck to Parenthood, that's a really fun and I think lengthy conversation that we'd have to go back and forth on. It is not, and I think Steve Martin has a much cleaner 1989 because he's in a very good movie that made a lot of money.
So just catching now, we're hitting the end of the 80s. What is the total? I had 5-4 and 88. So is it 5-5 at the end of the 80s? Did I miscount that?
Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Hey,
Fuck
look at that.
Yeah. No, with each getting one default year, lots of interesting films. We're at the end of the 80s. It is 5-5. Our original plan was to do through 95. We recorded our whole intro. We're going to do through 95. What a great idea. But fucking stupid. This took way too long. I should have known better. We're going to stop here. Next week, we're going to do 90 to 95, which, honest to God, will still probably be shorter because it's a lot less movies, I think, for at least John Candy. And, oh, that sounded sad the way I thought of that. But and there are not a lot of good movies there for either one of them, frankly. Maybe not as much to talk about. But we'll get to that. We will say thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe us. I know that's the most annoying fucking thing for people to say. But if you leave 5-star reviews, if you leave likes, if you leave comments, it helps us out. If you disagree, if you agree, if you got thoughts, let us know. You can find me, Mike Barcode, on TikTok, Instagram. There's a couple of Wait Are These Guys Friends pages around that I always joke about that I never update, but they're there. You can at least find the links to the show there. It'll be good. Randy, any final thoughts? You want to get us out of here, and we'll see you next week.
All I got is goodbye, everybody.